It's a Monday morning. Welcome to the AM News here on the AM Show. My name is Pakwesi Shandoff. We're starting off where a political risk analyst, Dr. Theo Echampon, is asking President Akufo-Addo to reshuffle his appointees. He wants, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta removed from office following government's decision to seek support from the International Monetary Fund to address current economic challenges. He says government needs some fresh energy as well as a reduction in the cost of running operations.
Perhaps, the finance minister, because ideologically, philosophically, and he's on record as having said that he doesn't support Ghana going to the IMF. Perhaps, and I use that word advisedly, the time has come for him to take a bit of a step back in this regard. But there are other people, I think, in government, other ministers, other appointees that the president really needs to sit down with his team. If you bring in the case of the president, it is Ghanaians who in 2024 will make that decision. It's as simple as that.
Can you just run through the list for us?
I mean, I said a number of things. First thing is we should have a reshuffle. Some ministers must go. The watchword is efficiency and delivery in public service. We must also see some demonstration in terms of the cutback of wasteful spending. The government said that they were going to cut the expenditure of the budget by 30%. Has that already been done? And if so, which areas are that in? On revenue generation, I am against the e-levy. My position on this is quite clear. What we can do to raise more revenue in the medium short term, pass the tax exemptions bill, and we will be able to plug some of those loopholes. The question of Article 71, we've debated this on your platform ad nauseum, but can we, even if not scrapping, significantly reduce that? Possible. As part of the IMF program, I think a number of the government flagship programs will be on the table for debate.
Now, away from that, Energy Minister Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh has disputed figures from the minority in Parliament on how much it will cost for government to relocate the Ameri plant to Kumasi. Minority spokesperson on Mines and Energy, John Jinapo, on Wednesday alleged it will cost $35 million to do that. But Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh says the cost of transfer is not yet known because the contract has not yet been signed.
The direct, unequivocated answer is that it is not yet known because no contract has been signed yet. Even though I can give a breakdown. The total cost, as in the question, what is the total cost of a relocation of Ameri is not yet decided because we haven't signed the contract yet. There are still negotiations at the level of VRA and the Ministry of Energy. The contract can only be signed off if it's an international contract after Parliament has approved it. So if it is an international contract, it would have to come to this House for approval, based upon which we can go and sign it off. I can tell your authority that what we can do now at most is to initiate the contract as a general agreement and bring it to Cabinet to the House before it is signed.
Now, Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia says state-owned enterprises that default in reporting audited financial accounts will be sanctioned. Speaking at the maiden edition of the Public Enterprises League Table Awards, Dr. Bawumia indicated government must generate beneficial economic and social outcomes from such investments, hence the decision to closely monitor the SOEs. As more in the following report.
The first ever Public Enterprises League Table Awards was held under the theme Improving Public Sector Businesses Outcome. It was used to recognize profit-making public businesses who are generating or adding value to the national coffers and to encourage non-performing state companies to become competitive. Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia said state-owned businesses who are defaulting in meeting audited financial accounting reporting will be sanctioned.
For those who have followed particularly the publication of the state ownership reports, you will notice that the state of reporting has significantly improved from what it was before. We had entities that had not presented audited reports or audited accounts over a long period. While stating this, however, I would like to admit that there are still several non-complying entities when it comes to financial reporting. I would like to also state that relative to timely financial reporting, the honeymoon is long over and severe sanctions will follow from now onwards for those who fail to meet required deadlines as specified in the law. The state must generate beneficial economic and social outcomes from its investments in these entities.
According to the 2020 State Ownership Report, state-owned enterprises recorded a cumulative loss of 2.6 billion cedis in 2020. This, however, represents nearly 50% improvement for the 2019 aggregate loss of 5 billion cedis. It is against this background that Minister of Public Enterprises and the State Interest and Governance Authority, SIGA, have moved to help curb the disturbing performance, and the Vice President has revealed that the central government is giving full backings to this cause. The Ghana National Petroleum Commission won the most compliant SOE. The Environmental Protection Agency won the most compliance regulator, whilst the DVLA won the Regulator of the Year and most digital specified entity. Deputy Finance Minister Abinal Seyasari says this move will encourage other organizations to be profitable.
With the appointment of the Minister for Public Enterprises and the full functioning of SIGA, I believe that we have a strong footing to actualize the transformational agenda of this government for our state enterprises in particular. It is our expectations that these institutional reforms will lead to a cutting-edge strategy to manage the portfolio of government investment in our state enterprises, and for which the performance management framework underpinning the league table will be a key element. I therefore welcome this initiative championed by the Ministry of Public Enterprises with the support of SIGA. I believe that in as much as we call out our underperformance of these entities, it is equally important to highlight achievements.
Other awardees are the Water Resources Commission, the most efficient regulator. The SOE of the year went to TDC Development Company and won the overall specified entity of the year. Here's the Sector Minister, Joseph Kujo.
State enterprises contribute significantly to the gross domestic product, GDP, of our economy and have a significant presence in the economy. And if they stagnate, the economy will not realize its full growth potential. Ladies and gentlemen, since assuming office as the Minister for Public Enterprises, there have been lots of efforts driven together by my office, SIGA, and the Ministry of Finance to build the capacities of board members and CEOs to attain good corporate governance practices.
General Secretary of the Opposition National Democratic Congress, Johnson Asiedu Nketia, wants all social democratic parties in Ghana to unite to rescue the country from the governing New Patriotic Party. He's asking them to go for principles and policies which are more sustainable. Mr. Asiedu Nketia spoke at the swearing-in of 1,000 defectors of the Progressive People's Party to the National Democratic Congress in WA. Correspondent Rafiq Salam now reports.
Addressing 1,000 supporters of the Progressive People's Party, PPP, in the Upper West region who have defected to the National Democratic Congress, NDC, General Secretary of the NDC, Asiedu Nketia, called on all social democratic parties in the country to see themselves as one and come together to annex power from the MPP in 2024.
If we are bent on focusing on the interests of Ghana, we should be prepared to forget about names and slogans and personalities who perform one operation or the other. Because individuals and personalities may fade away, but principles and policies will stay if we all believe in the principles of unity and national should be one political party, that is the National Democratic Congress.
The NDC's General Secretary, better known as General Mosquito in the political space, disclosed that the founder of the PPP, Dr. Pakwesi Indum, started his political career flirting with the NDC before he joined the New Patriotic Party NPP and later was made a minister in the Kufuor administration. The NPP, however, saw him too powerful and decided to cripple his wings, not only through his politics, but his business as well.
After they have finished using Dr. Kwasindum, they realized that he was becoming too strong a political force. So they have to cripple him, not only through crippling of his political party, but crippling of his business, so that he cannot find the financial muscle to run his political party.
Dr. Pakwesi Indum to join the Upper West Region's PPP's example and call on other regions to defect to the NDC.
I would like to send a message through this forum that I wish that Dr. Ndum would declare, as you have done today, that members of the PPP believe in social democracy, and for which reason they must all follow the example of the Upper West PPP. So we can build a formidable force to be able to defeat MPP and to rescue this country.
Spokesperson of the defectors, Adam Zaga Ganu, stated that they have defected to the NDC because of the numerous projects that the NDC has bequeathed to Ghanaians and the hardship that the MPP is inflicting on Ghanaians.
The settlement of developmental projects, such as the new regional hospital, UDS, now known as UBs, all of them, they have developed it in Wahia. We can all see it. And what they have done in Accra too. Construction of the new regional library. And then construction of E-blocks. They have done a lot.
Reporting for the News, Rafik Salam. Wow.
Vice-Chancellor of the Simon Diodong Dombo University, Professor Philip Dukwosei, has underscored the importance of monitoring and evaluation in the country's quest for development. Speaking at the launch of the Young Impact Associates program in WA, Professor Dukwosei hinted that Cabinet will soon pass a policy to guide monitoring and evaluation in Ghana. Rafik Salam, once again.
The Young Impact Associates YIA program is an initiative under the MasterCard Young Africa Work Strategy aimed at giving young people practical and theoretical training on monitoring and evaluation to make them competitive in the job market in Africa and beyond in order for them to have a dignified life. The Simon Diodong Dombo University of Business and Integrated Development Studies SDDU-BITS went into partnership with Participatory Development Associates PDA and Mobile Web Ghana to equip these young associates with unique monitoring and evaluation technique with particular focus on indigenous African-led evaluation techniques. Dr. Frederick Dayor is the SDDU-based coordinator for the YIA, and he shed light on the selection process of the 100 students that were trimmed down to 13.
We're looking at ages of 18 to 35, and that's actually the, how do you call it, the Ghana Youth Policy prescribes that age range for young people. So we went by that, and so some were dropped again. Then we went through an online selection process where they were interviewed. From there, they went through a face-to-face selection process, which was done in Accra. They wrote an exam as well, so it was quite a rigorous process, and we empaneled 5 panelists who did the selection, and we came to 18 of them who are now Young Impact Associates for the program for 2022.
Vice Chancellor of SDDU-BITS, Professor Philip Dukwosei, at the launch of the program, underscored the importance of monitoring and evaluation in the country's quest for development.
the cabinet is just about to pass into a policy that will be the guiding principle for conducting M&E in Ghana. We have also tried to shift the base for doing M&E in the public sector by moving it from the Office of the President to a Ministry for Monitoring and Evaluation and back to the Office of the President. M&E in the public sector is of utmost importance to the President. The reason why he has caused this movement back to where he can visibly see the actions that are taking place.
Impact Lead MasterCard Foundation, Maryland, and he was stated that the program is being rolled out in 7 other African countries and urged the young prostitutes to make good use of the opportunity given them.
The Young Africa Works strategy is to enable 30 million young women and men in Africa to secure dignified and fulfilling employment. In order to achieve this goal, the foundation will do the following. We are designing country-specific strategies. We are hoping to empower young women. We want to work with African organizations. We want to use technology to drive impact and scale. And finally, to share evidence-based knowledge and innovation.
Some of the young associates share their thoughts with Joy News.
But coming here, and then throughout the process, I realized that it's a very great program, and then it is something that I love to do. With my passion and interest in research, I developed that from my national service with Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, University of Ghana. And so when I saw this opportunity, I was like, wow, this is a great one. And then to broaden my research knowledge, yes, so I took up this opportunity.
Considering the fact that I have had my attempts to join a consultancy firm turned down because I have no knowledge in monitoring and evaluation. So when I had this notice, the advert on monitoring and evaluation project carried out here, I slot in my application and I was very happy because I believe at the end of the day I'll be equipped with the necessary skills and expertise to carry out monitoring and evaluation exercise within the continent at large.
Reporting for Joy News, Rafiq Salam.
A survey by the Kintampo Health Research Center shows that close to 1/4 of adults in the middle belt of Ghana are hypertensive, and less than half of them are aware of their status. The community-based research initiated in 2015 was to, among other things, understand the prevalence of hypertension in the Kintampo North and South districts. Correspondent Anasabet has been speaking with Solomon Nyami, who is the coordinator for the Hypertension Control Center study, at the center.
Hypertension is a major public health challenge affecting populations from both economically developed and developing countries globally. The disease remains a major risk factor for the development of cardiovascular diseases, which is responsible for over 17 million deaths worldwide in the year 2015. The highest prevalence of hypertension in the world occurs in the sub-Saharan Africa, where many patients of hypertension end up with strokes and myocardial infarctions. Hence, the disease is described as a silent killer. The Kintampo Health Research Center in the year 2015 embarked on a community-based study on the prevalence of hypertension within Kintampo North and South districts. Solomon Nyame is the implementation coordinator for the hypertension control study.
What happened was that in 2015, we wanted to understand the prevalence of hypertension within our setting. So what we did is that we spoke to about 2,500 participants within Kintampo North and South to help us understand the prevalence and other related information regarding hypertension and its related issues. So that's what informed our decision. So we used a standardized questionnaire, which is the WHO stepwise questionnaire, where we ask key questions about lifestyle, we ask questions about medication use, we ask questions about demographic questions and other, but we also collected some blood samples to do analysis for comorbidity.
The survey, amongst other things, revealed that the overall prevalence of hypertension stands around 25%, with more than half of the hypertensives not knowing their statuses.
The outcome, which has been published online, talks about the fact that we found the prevalence of hypertension to be around 25%. What it means is that when you take every 4 adults, one of them has hypertension. And then also what we also found was that out of those who were hypertensive, majority of them didn't know about their status. What it means then is that they are not really seeking care. And for those who knew about hypertension, I'm afraid to say that some of them are also, about half of them are not also seeking care at the facilities. And that meant there's a lot of people walking around with hypertension who are not really seeking care.
Again, in terms of disparities, the male subject had a significantly higher prevalence of pre-hypertension and stage 1 hypertension compared with female subjects.
We found that majority of the participants we interviewed were females. However, those with hypertension towards the male sex. And what it means is that, well, because of a lot of factors, for instance, we know that when it comes to the intake of alcohol, the male sex dominates. And also, in terms of gender, was that majority of the women were seeking care. However, when you include the men, about 15% of them were, at the time of the survey, seeking the needed care.
Solomon Yamin, however, admonishes Ghanaians to endeavor in seeking to know their statuses to ensure that they get the needed time.
The Ghana Health Service is putting in a lot of intervention for people to check their BP. This is not just for hypertensive patients. What we are trying to say is that if you are 18, and I'm stressing on 18 years and above, because we previously thought that hypertension was for people who, let's say, 40 years and above. But what you are realizing is that people below 40 years, even below 80 years, are still having hypertension. So when you go to the health clinic or whatever facility you find yourself, there are opportunities for you to check if you know your status, and whatever intervention the health system gives to you, try and adhere to it so that you don't get the complications which leads to death and all the other issues.
The study showed that one adults in the middle belt of Ghana had hypertension, with less than half of them being aware of their statuses. Anas Sabit, Joy News, Kintampo.
That's all for the news. The show continues with Bernice Abu-Baidoo. Do stay.
Hello, and thank you so much for staying on the AM show. Shortly, we'll be going into the papers, but now I would like to cross over to Joshua Asamoah, who is a senior forecaster at the Ghana Meteorological Service, for an idea of what the weather will be like today. Good morning to you, Joshua. What are you picking about today's weather?
Good morning, and good morning to everyone watching us. So for the next 24 hours, just like we had over the weekend, for the past few days, Greater Accra has been quite fair, and we are expecting these similar conditions to be experienced within the next 24 hours. We're just seeing some cloud developments towards the southwestern parts of Ghana. So areas around the western region towards the western of where we're expecting some cloudy conditions this morning. But these clouds will clear as the day progresses, and we'll see sunny conditions and clouds alternating during the next 24 hours. We are actually expecting some thunderstorms over areas in the northern parts of Ghana. And so the northeast, upper east, and then parts of the OT regions are expected to get some rain and thunder later this afternoon. And it will drift towards the western parts, that's the upper west, Savannah, and then a few areas in the Pono and Pono East regions as well. So today, where we are expecting rainfall are actually areas in the northern parts of the country, and some few areas in the southern portion, that's around the Ashanti, Eastern, and few areas in the Volta region. But for us along the coast, there's a very low probability that we'll get any rainfall within the next 24 hours. There will mainly be some slight to moderate rain for the western side, that's the upper, western region, and then few areas in the central region. But for us in Greater Accra, we are expecting mostly fair weather conditions during the next 24 hours.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Joshua Samoa is a senior forecaster with the Ghana Meteorological Agency, and he's been giving us the forecast of today's weather. Hope you will prepare depending on where you live and what the forecast is. So quickly, let's get into the papers. And, well, as we would expect, on the front page of many, in fact, all of the papers, there's the issue of Ghana going to the IMF for a bailout, but it's interesting how the different papers capture that particular story and the angles they take. Well, we've been joined by the Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleimana Brahima. Good morning to you, and thanks for your time, Suleimana.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Do you feel justified? Let me just start. I've seen your tweet in response to the announcement that the government was going to the IMF. You were one of those who mentioned earlier that, well, it looked like we couldn't stop it from happening. But do you feel justified now that we have an official announcement?
Well, as of March 2022, for some of us, the signs were so clear. I think the whole discussions around e-levy and the promises and all the kinds of assurances that were being given by government were clearly assurances to get people convinced about e-levy. But going to the IMF, there was no question about it. It's been delayed, but it's better late than never. And given that the economy had been mismanaged to collapse, there was no way we were not going to seek a bailout. And so it's great that finally we are there with all the consequences that we would face. But it's better than having a situation where at the end of the month, government being unable to pay salaries and then other statutory payments and defaulting on our debts, which would then get us into a terrible situation as a country. So we had no choice. I mean, this was the only available option for us to take, given the fact that the economy had been collapsed.
You just mentioned that one of the reasons that prompted you to make that prediction earlier had to do with mismanagement. But so let's go into the papers and see how the various papers capture Ghana's decision to go to the IMF. The Daily Dispatch has this: NDC went to IMF due to mismanagement. There was no crisis when they did, and that's according to Afenyo Marking. We heard Information Minister Kojo Oppong on the probe yesterday, put out that same impression that, look, we haven't mismanaged the economy. We have been hit by a global crisis, COVID, and the war in Russia and Ukraine. And this is from the ISA director, that is Professor Korti, and he says going to the IMF will restore confidence. The custodian says fallout from global crisis, Ghana, others seek IMF bailout. And I'll come to find out from you this justification also. I mean, we aren't the only people going to the IMF. It's a global crisis. So please, stop making a big fuss about our decision to go back to the IMF. So Daily Guide says over 100 countries run to IMF. So just keep in mind how the custodian and the Daily Guide capture it. The Republic says NPP NDC trade blames over IMF move. Kenneth Japan wants MPP says party can't break the 8 with IMF squad. And the Finder, end of 2019 economy not IMF bound. And okay, the Ghanaian Times surprisingly doesn't have anything on its front page about the IMF. And the Daily Statesman says increased global crisis pushes Ghana to IMF. And on the front page of the Daily Graphic, IMF intervention, government upbeat about economic stability. That's according to Information Minister Kojo Oppong. So let's start off this way. You mentioned mismanagement. Government says we haven't mismanaged the economy. In fact, we were doing better until we were hit by COVID and the war in Russia and Ukraine. What's your response to that, sir?
Well, there are a few things to be established. Indeed, the world is going through a crisis, and the crisis includes economic crisis. So if you engage people in the US, they will tell you inflation is rising, cost of living is rising, prices of items, including petrol or gas, is rising. You go to the UK, inflation is rising, cost of living is rising, and so on and so forth. So there's no doubt that there is an ongoing global economic crisis. That's so fundamental. And that is something that those who want to be truthful with their populations, with their citizens, governments that wanted to be very responsible and act devoid of arrogance and devoid of, deception, started having those frank conversations right from January. And then when Russia-Ukraine happened, conversations about the impact. If you take Egypt, for example, that imports about 70% of its wheat and other cereals from those two countries, it was clear that there was going to be a significant toll on cost of living, on prices of food, and so on and so forth. What was happening in Ghana was that the government was engaged in grand deception. The government was, as usual, on its PR governance trail in terms of thinking that people can always be deceived, we can manage the minds of people, we should continue to act as though we are, the wisest bunch of people in Ghana. And so when people were talking about the fact that, look, the economy, the way things are going, government may have to seek IMF intervention. When the Speaker of Parliament talked about the fact that information available to him suggests that very soon, if nothing was done, government was not going to be able to pay salaries of public sector workers. The Speaker was lampooned and bashed. And we were told, boldly, that we are an economy, we are a country, a proud country. We are not short-sighted people. We have the resources to manage our affairs. There's no way we will be going to the IMF. And this was in February by the finance minister. Later, the deputy finance minister was so emphatic. There's no way we are going to the IMF. People can do whatever they like. They know how to manage the economy and so on and so forth. So what were they saying? If people who are managing the economy 4 months ago could not predict, could not analyze the thing, and were, so emphatic that, everything is okay, and so on, is it a case that they were deliberately deceiving the people?
Well, could it also, sorry to interject, but could it also be the case that they were hoping that the e-levy could, help salvage the problem? Because that was...
Again, if that was their hope, then it tells you the fact that we have people who are managing the economy who really perhaps are either unfamiliar with the trends or just don't know what they are doing. Because even for people like us who are not economists, during the conversation of the e-levy, we looked at what had happened in other countries. We looked at what had happened in Uganda, what had happened in Sudan, what had happened in Kenya, in Tanzania, where the governments there thought, well, the economy, the digital economy is booming, and taxing it would be a way of raising significant amounts of money. When they introduced it, it failed. And we did publications about this to indicate that, look, other countries have tried the same model. Even for some of them, they pegged it as low as 1%, later reduced it to 0.5%, but it still didn't work. And therefore, there's no way that in Ghana it will work. So if the managers of our economy were still of the belief that they have the magic to make e-levy or digital taxation work when other countries like Kenya and other places couldn't manage to do it, again, it tells you that perhaps they had no clue about what they are doing. And it points to why we are having such a catastrophic failure, because the people managing the economy cannot analyze what is happening, cannot predict what is going to happen on the basis of either the global trends or our own economic indicators, and only gets us into accidents. I think that what we have now is an accident, because if you have the Minister of Finance, his deputy, and other people telling us there's no way we are going to IMF. And just 3 months or so or less, we are into IMF, then really are these people the competent people to manage our economy? And I doubt. And I'm not surprised that people are calling on the president to fire the finance minister, because this is the same person who said, we are not going to the IMF. And in a matter of months, we are into an IMF program.
So, Mr. Brema, the indication we get, especially with the finance minister and the president's decision that we should go to the IMF, it appears the finance minister is still standing by his decision that we shouldn't go to the IMF. In fact, listening to Kojo Ponkrumah on the probe yesterday, he did mention that the president also receives advice from other experts and speaks to, other people, and he has the ultimate decision on whether we have to go to the IMF or not. Does that worry you? I mean, because once we get the indication that, well, the finance minister is possibly still standing by his decision that we shouldn't go, and the president has made a decision not paying attention to the advice from his finance minister, clearly there appears to be a problem.
No, I think that's just basically a way of trying to redeem the credibility of the finance minister. And in fact, the way the communications came, knowing very well the position of the finance minister just a few months ago, and it pointing to, an indication that the finance minister may not be up to the task. Government had to, manage to salvage his credibility and redeem his credibility. And so let's put it out that it's the president who has, authorized that the Minister for Finance should engage IMF. But if it were the minister alone, he will still stick his earlier position that there was no way we should go to IMF. So quite clearly, the other troubling thing is that we have a government that you just cannot understand who is in charge. We have the vice president who is the head of the economic management team. Throughout e-levy, we didn't hear from him. I was told that the vice president is clearly opposed to the e-levy mechanism, and I believe that it was based on his sound knowledge of how things work and the fact that he's engaging so vigorously on our digitalization agenda. And so you have the vice president not talking. On this IMF conversation, you have the vice president not talking. But if we have a situation where without an IMF bailout, in the next 2 or 3 months, government cannot run the country because we cannot pay salaries of workers, we cannot make statutory payments, we are likely to default on our debts. What options are available? For me, the whole thing about the president authorizing, as I said, is a way of redeeming the credibility of the Minister for Finance, because quite clearly it points to the fact that we have a Minister of Finance who may not really be on top of issues and who may not really know how to manage the economy, because for a Minister of Finance, by 6 months you should know if the way things are going, we should be adopting a new policy, going to the IMF or whatever. But here was a minister telling one story and the indicators pointing to another story. I don't think that the Speaker of Parliament, when he made the point that we are likely not going to be able to pay salaries, he was lying. And he said credible information available to him. And this is the Speaker of Parliament, number 3 in the hierarchy of leadership in this country. And so again, for me, we have a global crisis. Unfortunately, I don't think that it would have been a big deal going to the IMF, except that previous commentaries and statements by the same government would have betrayed the fact that they are going. But given what is happening in the world today, it wouldn't have been surprising for me, except that the arrogance of this government and the tendency to behave as if they are the wisest bunch of people or group of people, and the tendency to behave as if we can deceive the people forever, the tendency to behave as if PR can do all the things for us as a government is unprecedented. I don't think that we've seen this level of arrogance, this level of deception, this level of PR governance throughout the Fourth Republic. And that is why we are where we are. Otherwise, if people's expectations had been managed and people understood that, look, Russia, Ukraine, COVID-19, countries are struggling, even the advanced societies, US, the UK, every country is struggling, people would understand. But we have a government that wants to show off, a government that wants to grandstand, a government that wants to deceive, a government that wants to do propaganda all the time and behave as if it's the best thing ever, best thing Ghana ever had. And that is why, you know, they are now struggling, putting ministers all over media houses to speak. I've come across, you know, the communication lines that they want to use, sending it out to, you know, people who will be in the media and so on and so forth. Again, still on the PR thing, instead of accepting that, look, globally, there's a crisis, we are a government, we accept that, look, the time has come for us to do this, and we apologize for all the grandstanding statements that we made, as if we have whatever it is that can take this country from, you know, third world to first world. That for me is the problem of the government and the problem that we all have.
Following from what I said earlier about the finance minister and his stance and the president having the ultimate responsibility, and what you just said about the vice president, who is the head of the EMT, do you get a sense that there is no real collaboration in terms of where we want to go as a country and the plan to get us there? Because if what we heard from the information minister is anything to go by, that the finance minister, well, still, you know, says we won't go to the IMF. He still kind of believes in that. But we have different experts advising the president. The president has ultimate responsibility. We've not heard from the vice president. What does that really display? What does that speak of the team which is supposed to be working together to take us to a certain destination?
Well, first of all, it's very unclear to know who is in charge when it comes to the management of our economy. Certainly, Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has demonstrated, level of competence or level of knowledge when it comes to the economy. Having served at the Bank of Ghana during the period of redenomination, and people say, well, even the actual redenomination process, Bawumia was somebody who was very key in the process. And if you listen to his analysis of the economy, even though sometimes there's a bit of propaganda here and there, but to be able to even do that shows the level of smartness and his understanding of the economy and how things work. But I think over the period, he's either been sidelined and people are doing what they want to do. For me, I keep saying that if there is one thing I've learned, leadership thing I've learned, lesson I've learned from the governance of President Akufo-Addo is, how catastrophic it is to surround yourself with family and friends and yes men and yes women. And that is what is happening. I think that sometimes maybe the president himself is not giving the right information, but there are people that he has surrounded himself with who would tell him, Mr. President, everything is okay. Mr. President, we will do it. Mr. President, don't worry, everything is fine. Rather than listen to maybe the vice president who is the head of the economic management team. Because otherwise, I would have loved to see Vice President Bawumia on the front lines indicating how things are going. And I will be shocked and surprised if in the last 4 or 5 months, someone like Dr. Bawumia didn't know that the way things are, IMF bailout is something that is imminent. I would be surprised. But as I said, you just cannot tell who is in charge. We have, for the first time, a government that does no reshuffle. A minister is away from the country for almost a year, still keeps her post. So you really cannot understand who is in charge and whether we are on autopilot or really the president is managing the affairs of the country as he should.
We've heard from the TUC. There are concerns about the conditions this bailout may come with, and they cite the previous one that we went for, where there was a freeze on salary increments, there was a freeze on employment in the public sector. But you don't have a problem with us going to the IMF. In fact, you predicted this, and in your tweet, you said that is not the problem. Going to IMF is not our problem. But the TUC is concerned. We don't know yet what the conditions are with regards to this particular program and how it will pan out. But it clearly shows that there definitely is a crisis. The TUC doesn't want it, but it appears we have to go for it. I don't know if you were in the shoes of the TUC in terms of looking at it from a different perspective, the general economy of the country, and what will your advice or compromise will be.
Well, first of all, let me say that going to the IMF is not my preference. Okay. It's just that it was the only option. We had run the economy to the ground to the point where the only option available was to go to the IMF. And so my point was, look, whether e-levy or no e-levy, we would have to go to the IMF. Not because I love us as a country going to the IMF, but that was the only option available. For the TUC and other public sector workers, and yesterday I think I read somewhere that Professor Jampo was saying Ghana will be ungovernable if the IMF conditionality includes freeze on salary,
yes,
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. The reality is that we take it that we are in a family. You have the family head who is supposed to manage the resources of the family, so that you don't go borrowing. Because if you go borrowing, the one giving you the money would have certain conditions for you, and you have no choice because you need the money. That is the situation that we find ourselves in now. We, as a country, are endowed so much, and that is why Mr. Foriata said we have the resources. And indeed, we have the resources. It's just that the resources have been abused, has been looted, you know, and messed up to the point where, you know, we have to go borrowing. And once we've gotten to the point where we are going to borrow, unfortunately, we, the family members, have no choices to make. The Ebusiapeni, the family of the head of family, is the one who is going for the borrowing, and we need the borrowing in order to be able to survive. Otherwise, we can't survive. So, going for the money, is it better to go for the money and come and the one who gives us the money says, please keep salaries where they are, or we don't go, and at the end of the month, we don't get paid at all? This is the situation we find ourselves in. It's either we don't get paid at all and not go to the IMF, or we go to the IMF with all the conditionalities which may include the fact that salaries should be frozen. Because the IMF basically is coming to manage the economy for you, to make sure that, you know, things are reset properly. And to do so, salaries may have to be frozen. Maybe unemployment, employment as was done previously, may have to be frozen. For me, the only good thing is that maybe the looting will reduce. Because if we had a responsible, caring, and a government that doesn't want to go to IMF, such a government would not be, you know, dishing out money towards cathedral when they know that this is our economic situation. Such a country or a government would not be parceling out millions of money to private companies in a fictitious fumigation exercise when they know that that exercise will not do anything under COVID. If fumigation could deal with COVID, why? US, China, and others, do we have capacity to fumigate our country better than them? Why were they struggling? Spain, Italy, people died in hundreds, sometimes in thousands a day. Why couldn't they fumigate? But it was an opportunity for people to loot. And so hundreds of millions of cedis were awarded in needless contracts so that people can get money away. This is how our resources have been abused. Companies have made millions of cedis as transaction advisors. Even after COVID, we are still taking loans to Parliament for approval in relation to COVID. So I think this government must accept that it's not the case that we didn't have the resources. It is not because of COVID. It is not because of Russia and Ukraine. It is simply because the economy has been messed up, because our resources have been looted, corruption has been on the high, and people have basically fraudulently abused our resources in such a way that the only way and only option available to us now is to go to the IMF. And once we are going with cap in hand, we cannot dictate what the conditions must be, unfortunately. So TUC and others, we should all be prepared for the consequences.
So for you, even though 100 countries are going to the IMF, just has been captured on the front page of the Daily Guide, you believe that if we have managed our economy better, despite COVID and the war in Russia and Ukraine, we could have been doing better and not even have to go to the IMF at all. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And if we had time, I could count maybe more than 100 countries around the world who, when they go to the IMF, shouldn't be surprising at all. Why? For example, Burkina Faso, the crisis that they are going through, and the resource deprivation that they are in. If they are going to IMF, why should Ghana be comparing ourselves to Burkina Faso, to Mali, the crisis that they are going through, Niger, where they are, the climatic conditions? How are they even able to grow food that is helps them to be sustainable in terms of food production? You take countries like Haiti, the DRC. There are several countries that you can point to that have been in constant crisis, Guinea-Bissau, and so on. So why are we not saying that there are more than 100 countries that have not gone to the IMF? Why are we not comparing ourselves to those countries, but rather comparing ourselves to those that have run to the IMF? And Ghana is so much endowed. What is it that we don't have? What is it that we don't have? We have the right land, the right environment, the natural resources. Oforiatta himself said it, and the president himself said it. Yet what was the president seeing at that time? And this is somebody who has been in government before. It's not as if President Akufo-Addo has not been in government before. He's been in government before. So when he said what was he referring to? When Ms. Oforiatta said that we have the resources, so we are not going to IMF, what resources was he talking about? Ghana is so much endowed. It is just absolutely mismanagement. And we've gone to the IMF back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And for me, it's all a case of mismanagement. A country that doesn't have and yet wants to live as if we have, all that it takes to live like kings and queens. We have the president still chartering the luxurious, aircraft,
private jets.
Yes.
So
live like kings.
So right now, we know that we're going to the IMF. The other issue for many people is whether or not we'll be able to effectively execute the program. That's another chapter altogether, and whether, like it's happened in time past, we won't fail. So what would your desire be going into the IMF and seeing that we have done this over time and sometimes we haven't succeeded? What would you hope to see, especially with the attitude of government, like you've mentioned? What changes would you like to see to ensure that this program we are even going for will be a success at the end of the day?
Well, I think the government has to do what it ought to have done to prevent us from going to the IMF in the first place. We don't need this 100 ministers or so to run this country. It is just job for the boys. It is just reward. We don't need to have the levels of corruption that we have had over the period. We don't need the level of looting that we've witnessed over the period. So far, if the corruption perception index is anything to go by, the current government's best performance has been the worst performance of the previous government. And we all know that I'm not by this saying that the previous government was any better. I think if we have good leadership, this country will be transformed in such a significant way. So we had a government that was a failure, and we have a government that is a failure now. And what it takes is cut down on the expenditure, reduce the levels of ministers that we have, reduce the levels of corruption and looting that we are witnessing. And if we are able to do that, I will get to a point that we don't need these international and Bretton Woods institutions coming in to support us. I think that if we have a good leader, this country will be significantly transformed. We were hoping that President Akufo-Addo will give us that kind of good leadership that we had lacked for long. Unfortunately, he has not been different from all the leaders that we've had. And in some contexts, it's even been worse under him.
So now to the big one that a lot of people have been asking: should we scrap the e-levy now? We know that it's not raking in how much we thought it will. Now we are going to the IMF. Is it necessary to keep the e-levy?
Well, the e-levy was unnecessary from day one. As I said, the amount of money that is looted through government schemes is far more than what Ms. Oforiatta was projecting that we would have from e-levy. And so they had the opportunity to ensure that those loopholes are plugged and all those fictitious contracts and inflated contracts are scrapped so that we can make the money. Now with e-levy, for me, of course, as I said, it's unnecessary. It's something that is going to affect us negatively than positively. But now that we have had no choice but to go to IMF, and IMF coming in to ensure that you are able to manage your economy, I'm sure different taxes will be proposed and government may have to adhere to them and all other measures. And under the circumstances, I don't know if it will be the right thing for the government to say, even though we are running to the IMF, the policy that we put in place that is giving us some money, even though not as much as we were anticipating, we want to scrap that. I doubt they would have the courage to be able to do that, because you are going out there to beg and to ask IMF to come and manage the economy for you because you have been poor at managing it. You couldn't manage your own affairs. You are inviting them to come and manage it. I guess this is not the time for you to say, even though I'm coming to you to beg for you to come and manage the economy for me, the measures that I've put in place that is generating some money for me, I'm going to scrap it. I doubt they would have the courage to do that. But e-levy, talking to people, listening to people, it's quite clear that it's going to be an impediment to our growth rather than a decision or an action that would support our growth.
Okay, so let's take a breather from the e-levy. The big story on the front page of the Daily Graphic is quite an interesting one. And it says, Ghana needs righteousness, not churches, leaders. That's according to Apostle Eric Nyamiche. And he is the chairman of the Church of Pentecost. And so let me just bring details of the story and take your quick thoughts as we wrap up the news review. He says that what the nation needs are not leaders and churches, but righteousness exhibited by the citizenry through faith. He noted that although there were many churches and leaders in the country, righteous living was still an issue. The chairman added that the change the country sought from its leaders could only materialize through righteous living and building a righteous brand. What are your quick thoughts on this? I don't know. When I just read the story, I couldn't help but think about the National Cathedral. I don't know if the same happened to you, but I mean, I'm just reading this. Ghana needs righteousness, not churches, and instantly my mind goes to the National Cathedral. But let me hear what you think about what he said.
Well, I think I subscribe to the idea that we need righteous people. Righteous people would seek to always do the right thing, would seek to be just, would seek to be fair, and treat those who are underprivileged with the kindness that they deserve. That is something that I subscribe to. But I also believe that righteous people are people that speak truth to power. Righteous people are people who will tell leaders in the face if they are failing or when they are failing. And therefore, I expect people in leadership position in our churches who are speaking like this to be able to also speak to the leadership of the country. That, look, what we need is righteous acts from you. And righteous acts would mean that you wouldn't loot our monies, you wouldn't be corrupt, you wouldn't inflate contracts, and so on and so forth. And I am of the view that people in this country, of course, in terms of moral turpitude, in terms of ethical values and so on, we are losing it. And we are losing it partly also because leadership from governmental, non-governmental, religious are not showing the kind of examples that would enable people emulate the righteous tendencies that we all want. We have so many churches, we have so many mosques, Why is crime on the rise? Why is corruption on the rise? Why is it that our leaders, whether President Mahama, President Akufo-Addo, all the ministers, Mr. Oforiatta goes to Parliament and always will quote the Bible before starting the presentations and so on and so forth. Why are we where we are? So people just pretend. And I would urge leaders like Apostle Nyamiche and co to also begin to say the things as they are, rather than, all the things. Yes, we need righteous people, but you should tell the president, the ministers, and the opposition leaders, and all those people that, look, we are not having righteousness in terms of leadership from you, and therefore begin to act the right way. Otherwise, sometimes some of these things, as people will say, beating about the bush and saying the sweet things in the ears, but which will not translate into any meaningful thing for all of us.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Suleiman Ibrahima, for joining us this morning for the news review. Suleiman Ibrahima is Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, and we've been talking largely on government's decision to go to the IMF for a bailout. He's one of the people who said, look, it will happen, and it has happened. Thank you so much. We appreciate it, and we'll stay in touch with you, Suleiman Ibrahima. Right now on the show, we're going to bring you sports news shortly. Do stay. Thank you for staying on the AM show. So earlier you saw some excerpts of that conversation my colleague Emefa Pau had with Information Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. Today, to continue that conversation on Ghana's decision to go to the IMF, I have the former Finance Minister Seth Tekpe here in studio with me, and Professor William Pepra, an Associate Professor of Finance at the School of Business, Andrews University in the USA. The two of them are in the studio with me. Seth Chuma Kwabwa, CEO of Association of Ghana Industries, and Gideon IEO tax partner Deloitte Ghana will be joining us via Zoom. Let me start with you, Mr. Tekwe, because you'd have to be leaving out soon. Government has been trying to give a lot of reasons for the decision to go to the IMF now, because earlier we heard from the finance minister who stated emphatically that the IMF was not an option. We were not going there. Government says, look, when the NDC went to the IMF, it was due to mismanagement. Kojo Oppong Nkrumah said the same thing. It's a different scenario, they say. This time, we've been hit by a global crisis. In fact, he even adds that there were some interventions, but in his words, the global crisis or the impact of the crisis was so severe that the interventions they put in place could not save the Ghanaian from the impact on the global crisis. So, clearly, two different scenarios. Do you agree, at least?
No, not entirely. We left buffers for them. I think my good friend Kojo is not telling Ghanaians that
he says COVID depleted the buffers. They had to support Ghanaians.
Let me just, I'll come to that. But he's not telling Ghanaians that we paid down the first sovereign bond, which was to mature in 2017, 336 million US dollars, using our own oil revenue we put in the sinking fund. We left 250 million, and they used 200 million on October 4th, the 10th anniversary, 2017, of the bond. It was a 10-year bond, to pay it off. They should give some credit. He's not telling Ghanaians that the initial amount that was taken from the stabilization fund, 250 million, remember it went to, was money that we left, which they could have increased with 3 oil fields. With 3 oil fields. And the way you win yourself of the IMF, if they had increased it with 3 oil fields to about 750, that's 250 is 1/4 of the money we took from the fund, COVID. 750 would have been 3/4, and that's how you get yourself. Right, so why didn't they, improve on all of these things? As we speak, they've taken almost 400 million from the stabilization fund. Let's come to COVID. IMF gave us COVID loan, $1 billion US. SDR, $1 billion US. World Bank, almost $600 million. African Development Bank, I could go on and on, almost $6 billion. Bank of Ghana, $1.7 billion. Ghana cedis, sorry, US dollars. That's the equivalent of the $10 billion that was given. First time ever in about 40 years that we did that much deficit financing. Are they saying that $6 billion US? Is that more efficient management? When we did the ECF against the background of global economic crisis, which, by the way, started from 2008, but then we came into office in 2009. And are they saying, for heaven's sake, that, the breach of the pipeline in Nigeria is domestic? Is Nigeria region in Ghana? And if it's domestic, was it not severe enough for 2.5 years? I think we should be focusing on what has to be done now. The IMF did a correction, and I have a graph. We don't have time to show it. I could come back and... The IMF did a correction in 2019 in Article 4. They revised all the, because of the bailout, and other things which were being, And they revised the deficit to 7.2, to 7.2, to 7, to 7.2 as we speak. The IMF is saying in 20, and I'm reading from the Article 4. IMF document, which I agree with, it's just been released, 2021 Article 4. IMF is saying that the deficit we left in 2021 was 15%. IMF is saying that, let me read this, the government headline measures excludes liabilities that pertain to the central government, including ESLA debt, for which we have ESLA revenue. And yet, you use the revenue, you collateralize it, and then you leave out the debt. It's also saying that it leaves out educating, get fund, stroke, DACHI, that's the collateralization, and extra budgetary funds such as Sino-Hydro. These are all not part of, I'm talking about 2021, this is the 2021 Article 4. These are the issues which they are going to be discussing with the fund. This is an IMF, this is something which they have, let me just finish. Staff's definition of public debt, coverage, government, that would also include the liabilities of non-financially autonomous state-owned enterprises, such as Cocoa Board. Have you not been that nine? Cocoa Board is in such a difficulty, that is, for the first time, Cocoa Board debt has never been added to government. These are the issues. This is Article 4. Let's be talking about that now. That is what we need in the program. When we have single span and others, and I see the concern of labor, but we start with labor, and we agreed to pay it over a period of 3 years. What was their response? This is the authorities' views. That is, listen to the response. It's saying that on the basis of these factors, direct and indirect COVID-19 spending reached 4.6% of GDP in 2020. The authorities, that's the government, stressed that non-inclusion of expenditure arrears in 2020 fiscal deficit, right? Government considered that it wasn't part of the fiscal deficit, noting that these arrears were yet to be audited and that the 2021 budget and fiscal medium-term projections already include above, That is not the basis of our own law. Our own law says that once you incur the expenditure, you must, put it into you must add it. The Auditor General comes later to do auditing of what has happened. And if it is pre-audit that they're talking about, that's why we have the internal audit agency that should have done it. So these are the reasons why all these, the Sino-Hydro and all those things were left out. I think Parliament has a responsibility, to query someone. What it means that the budget that we've been focusing on and discussing. In fact, when it comes to arrears, the fund estimates in this same document up to 2.70% of GDP was left out. And if you calculate, the arrears in the budget is 0.4. So it means if you add 0.4 to the 2.5 with the fund is talking, it's almost 3% of GDP. And you can imagine that means that the fiscal balance is far higher than what they are talking about. You know, so I think that let's focus on, you know, let's focus on
what it is now.
Exactly, that's the problem. I could defend the Mahama administration empty time. Let's focus. We can have time. I'll produce graphs to show that the deficit that we left was 6.1. They padded it and said it was 8.3. Eventually, when our parliamentarians took His Excellency Nanado on after the SONA, that's when the Minister for Finance started saying that the deficit we left was 6.1 and 6.3. It is the best. With 3 oil fields, we did that with 1. It is the best to date. I challenge them. We have the figures. After, if you make all those adjustments, because we had all those, you know, we left debt on the rebase basis of 57%. They've taken it to 85. What kind of performance are they saying is better than the Mahama administration?
Okay, so talking about moving forward, the TUC is concerned about conditionalities. We are yet to know. But from where you sit and in what you've just read to us so far, do you expect that there will be tougher conditions to this particular program than what we experienced during the Mahama
What I expect, like a homegrown policy, right, is that the government would answer to Ghanaians in the program. So they should publish the program for us to know whether these things have been adjusted, and that's what they are going to negotiate with the fund. Okay. If you take our letter of intent and the memorandum of economic policy, it's on the website. You will see in there, you will see sinking fund, you will see infrastructure fund, all those measures that we said we were going to implement. It was taken out after they took, you know, after the ECF. And by the way, they accuse us of taking Ghana to the IMF.
When it wasn't necessary.
When it wasn't necessary.
That's what they say.
But they took the balance. They took the balance. Are you aware that they took the balance of the ECF? Because the ECF is not released like COVID or SDR, and you are giving the whole money. It is released in tranches. There was about a third. And with 3 oil fields, you know, and with the buffers and everything that were left, when they continued the program, they could have even given all, you know, to the central bank, you know, as we were doing. Our budget support came from the World Bank and the others. All of the ECF that we took, they took that money and took part of it as budget support. What is it that was ailing? It is expenditure management, right? The fund is saying it quite clear. We lack the time. Quite clear that there were extra budgetary expenditures. Remember, President Mahama said he's in London and he was roasted, you know, that there are extra budgetary expenditures that are taking place. That means transactions are taking place outside GIFMIS. So it means that some of us have been doing and adjusting all the time and saying that it is not reflecting. Remember our position of bailout costs. Those are the issues that we are going to be confronted with in the negotiations with the fund. And that is what I expect them to be, you know. It's a long way since 2016. You inherited 3 oil fields against 1 oil field and all that. See? So Ghanaians expect that with all of that and with the buffers that were left, including stabilization fund, you know. And today, crises are inevitable. Yes. Today, crises are inevitable. And I can tell you that if you look at the projections that we have, the sinking fund is supposed to be 0 by 2025. The stabilization fund, you know, all those things. You know, so please, I hope this is just enough for my good friend. You know, yes.
All right. So let's talk about what the processes are now that we expect the team to be here on Wednesday. So, what usually is the procedure? What happens next after this?
Well, the government is supposed to, when they arrive, that's the staff coming, supposed to give a position, because we invited them, as I said, like the homegrown, and say this is, you know, what we want to do. In the absence of that, since these were agreed, then this is going to be the basis for the discussion.
Okay.
These were agreed with government. There was a staff visit in April.
Yes.
So if the government is not prepared and they haven't told us what they are, I went to Parliament to tell Ghanaians what we're going to put before the IMF. You know, so this, what I am reading now, and I urge Ghanaians to read for themselves. It's now on the website, Article 4, 2021. Let your producers and then we can have a conversation and you see the revelations. So in the absence of our own program, these are going to be the basis. Are you going to put, in fact, they spoke about Bank of Ghana and expect that Bank of Ghana will go back to 0 financing. Are we capable? We went to 0 financing. Bank of Ghana financed half of the deficit in 2020. They never gave COVID as a reason. They said if they were, it's in the MPC report, again you can download it, that if they were not to give government support, government would have difficulty borrowing and interest rates will go up. The very thing that is happening now. That was the reason.
And so usually when the staff of the IMF arrive and their deliberations and engagements, are there changes made to the policy document?
Well, eventually, so after the engagement, it will take line by line. It will take what they are saying on revenue, what is the expenditure position, because that is what is leading to the deficit on the fiscal side. So what measures do you have over the 3 years or so of the program, to bring it to manageable proportions so that it stops increasing, the debt, which is a major concern. Then they go to the sector, energy sector. In fact, they spoke about energy sector. This document is very important. I urge Ghanaians to look at it. They'll talk about energy sector because the sectors, particularly the World Bank staff that are likely to come, they are interested in the sectors because they give budgets of support to all these sectors. And then they go to the monetary, led by the governor. And they will tell them all the things that they want to do, interest rate policy and all that, all those rates. And they have consultations with labor and other chamber of commerce and all those. Yes, so it's a very broad base, Then they put all this together, and then, so they'll then come with what they think needs to be done against the government position, right? And then you come to some form of compromise. And that is what goes into the Memorandum of Economic Policy and Economic and Financial Policy, and the letter of intent which the minister and the governor, signs. Yes.
So,
and it's only then that you would have concluded. So this negotiation, if we have a position on all of this, can be fast. Otherwise, it takes a while, 6 to 9 months.
Back to my earlier question, based on this document that you've seen, and all the issues you've raised in that document.
It's an official document.
Yes, I know. Yes. So should we expect, back to my question, should we expect tougher conditions? Because a lot of people appear to be very concerned about that. We are in difficult times. The cost of living keeps rising. Should we expect, like in your case, a freeze on salaries, a freeze on employment? I mean, per your experience, expertise, and what you've seen in this document.
Well, the government has to justify. The government, look, the point is it in our interest to reduce the deficit? I think we must ask ourselves as Ghanaians, is it in our interest to reduce the deficit? So that we can have debt that is manageable? Is it in our interest to stop putting energy sector costs as amortization only when it is paid? Is it in our interest not to reflect SDR, which we received? We didn't show it as revenue. Then we showed it straight. Why? Because if you showed it as revenue, one of the reasons is that then it means that the deficit will narrow. And you wouldn't have to take money from the stabilization fund. So those are questions we have to ask ourselves first. And these, for us, were the things that prompted us to do Senchi consultation. Because you are asking questions now. Labor, everybody will be there. Because you are going into a program that will affect all of them. Right? And remember, we wanted to do a homegrown policy. In fact, there's a feeling that we said we didn't want to go to IMF. No, we were negotiating intermediate programs. They have some programs, like the Policy Support Instrument, PSI, where you say, this is my policies, we agree with you, but we are not taking your money, which we believe, with the buffers that we left. Or you can also do, and that comes with a standby agreement, which means that in a period like COVID, that's when you go, to get some money, right? So these are all issues which you have to discuss. But the thing that pushes really to do that was, at a point in time, because of single spine and others, the development partners withdrew budget support, including the World Bank. And that was the reason that we said, okay, what does it take? Let's be pragmatic, but let us continue with our, programs towards winning the country of, the fund. Winning doesn't mean you are disengaging completely. No, you remember Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain, the so-called peaks during the global financial crisis. These are advanced countries, but they went to the fund. They are part of the EU, right? So these are the positions, and that's why in the view and in the experience, President Mahama said, let us have a national discussion, because you are going to do something that will affect all of Ghanaians and have some consensus. And let me say that, I'm not saying that the NPP lacks expertise. No, after all, the senior minister negotiated an IMF program. Dr. Kutu said with Bernice, negotiate an IMF program under the Kufuor administration and all that. And they were part of discussions even for Senchi and the rest. So they should open the tent even internally within and have the discussion and send a proposal to...
I'm glad you mentioned the issue of expertise. Earlier on the show, speaking to Suleiman Ibrahima, there are concerns that it appears government doesn't have a united front when it comes to the management of the economy. So we heard the finance minister and his deputy say we were not going to the IMF. Now we hear an announcement from government that we are going to the IMF. Kojo Nkrumah says, well, these things happen this way. The finance minister goes to cabinet, lays his plan down. The president has the ultimate responsibility to say, I'm going to take it or not. So the impression we are getting is that he's heard from other experts and other people who understand the economic system better. Do you think there are people who have called for the finance minister to be sacked? Is this the right team to be leading us in these times?
If you give me a pass on this, the president has his team. My boss has spoken about that. President Mama has spoken in his view. He has a lot of experience, and I wouldn't want. I can only re-echo, what he said, because that is basically because we have an executive presidency, right? We have an executive as we had an executive presidency. I believe that before President Mahama said that he's a man who consults, widely, not just within the NDC, but and he's not the only person who has expressed, some of these sentiments. So I want to focus on, frankly, the challenge, ahead of us, according to this document.
You're avoiding the politics, eh? Okay, so let me just come back to the Prof. I'll come to you. We don't have enough time, and he has to leave us soon, so I want to milk him as much as I can. So, and I'm quoting Kojo Nkrumah, the IMF will not solve our bigger economic problem. So what will, Mr. Tekpe?
Why did you dismantle the structures there? You see, it's not, let me give you figures. I like facts. Let me give you figures. We took 250 million. To date, we have taken almost 400 million out of the stabilization fund, the current government. We left 200 million, which I said added to 550 million. If you add nearly 300 or 400 from the stabilization fund, right, to the, from the stabilization to the sinking fund, I'm not talking about the heritage fund and others, that alone gives you 800 million. If we do, when we did a fund program, we got 900 million. And these are the sort of buffers that we were building, right? These are the buffers we were building. So if they had, and they have 3 oil fields, so why did they destroy all those structures? Why were they saying we should take heritage fund, and use it to support, consumption? Today we have almost 600 million, about 400 million of which, came from, and PIAC has raised concern. Those are the structures that would make us stand on our own feet. The PRME, and the Ghana Infrastructure Fund, which would then be the leverage for borrowing for commercial projects. You know what? We never issued a sovereign guarantee for Terminal 3. And we didn't issue a sovereign guarantee for the MPS Tema project. Why? Because we ring-fenced the revenue, right? Of course, you are facing the, Ports and Harbors Authority boss, you are facing airport company boss, and they are saying, but I've been receiving this money, and I'm saying, go and use the services and others. This is a tax. We ring-fence that, and that is what underwrote, Terminal 3 and the rest. These are the structures which, and Ghana Infrastructure Fund was given the land to do a concourse and a hotel and whatever, and they were eventually going to, and they have a share. Ghana Infrastructure Fund has a share. When we did the bond, we gave it a seed capital, and part of it was used. These are the structures you put in place. So I'm giving you the numbers. That if with 3 oil fields, the government had continued, let the preaching stop, practicals. If it had stopped, we'll probably have had 1.5 million, 1.2 by my conservative, estimation, right? And probably wouldn't have gone to there would be no need to go to the fund. Or we would have gone to the fund at the time when the crisis was deepening and every other countries were going. So I think that, yes. So we believe strongly that we started, let me say point blank that the measures that we said we were putting in place, which was the reason we did the homegrown, we never took them away. When we did ESLA revenue, which is being used to resolve, they never give credit for it. It's the ESLA funds which was collateralized. It wasn't part of IMF. Take the IMF program. It wasn't part of IMF program. We did it. We told the fund we were doing this. We were imposing taxes which were to last 3 to 5 years' time, right? Forming the structures, that were needed. So those are the sort of structures. And it was meant to be temporary because since the Rawlings administration, we have had 2 instruments, temporary import duty and then the fiscal stabilization levy, right? Which was implemented within 2 to 3 years to take it off as part of the IMF packages, right? And the Honorable Osafo, it was called the National Stabilization Levy, and then temporary. We had it when we had our crisis. In fact, under my former boss, Dr. Dufo, when we did the IMF program in 2009, we had it. And we removed it. When we came in, we had it. It was to be removed. The fiscal stabilization levy is still there, and they have added a FinSec levy, in addition. The only government that did not take it away.
Mr. Sekwe, aren't we being too hard on this government? There are about 100 countries that are going to the IMF for support, and even some, economies that we say were largely well-to-do than Ghana prior to COVID and the global crisis. Aren't we being too hard? I mean, on
you see, IMF? Well, no, I'm only clarifying things for Ghanaians. When somebody belittles your crisis, and probably belittled it, from the past, and therefore stop building the buffers, you don't come and pontificate. That's the point I'm making. I'm only telling Ghanaians, that we were putting buffers in place, they were discontinued. Buffers depending on one oil field. Remember, crude oil prices dropped from $90, to sub-30s. It never hit, $50 before we left office. 10 fields Sankofa came on stream, it added. We had the tariff-bearing problems and everything, right? So when you belittle all of these, crises, which led to, that your station had a generator, at the time of the doomsday, right? So when you don't belittle those things, was that the reason, that you say it's domestic and therefore you didn't strengthen the, the buffers? No. But let me also point out that I could take the article for 2019. I could take it. The fund did an adjustment. So our problems, the adjustments that were made, which the government considered, like they have their views and whatever, preceded COVID. That's my first point. There was a gap of about 5%, which if you do some corrections, by the time we got to COVID and we took the COVID loan, the COVID report was still reporting that gap of about 7%, right? So you can't attribute everything to COVID. Ghana had oil. Ghana was using the oil. We were blessed, right? Whatever the oil was used, they should explain, and not be putting the blame, on President Mahama. I'm here to defend the record because it's there, and I've told you the buffers and things, and our plan, And so you don't put it, and in any event, as I said earlier on, 6 billion US dollars, multiplied by 6, not 8. That gives about 30 billion. That's close to half of what GRA brings in a whole year to resolve COVID. And we still keep blaming, somebody. Tell me which of the administrations from the Rawlings side. Yeah. Bushfires. Some of us almost, stopped schooling because our grandparents and parents were cocoa farmers. When the cocoa farms bent, but for cocoa board scholarship and the rest. Droughts, Akosomo Dam under the Kufuor administration, what did they do? They came up with Bui Dam. Rawlings came up with the thermal plants, if you remember. And then we, on the onset of oil, apart from all that I'm saying, put up a Tuabo. Have we expanded a Tuabo with 3 oil fields? We collateralized the revenue to pay for it. Ghana Gas Company was to pay, for the debt, just as the airport company and the rest, to pay so that we can use it to expand. So I'm only defending the record. I'm not being hard. And I'm saying that, yes, I'm not in denial. COVID is severe, right? COVID is severe, and it's worse than global financial crisis. That I admit. Ukraine. You remember, immediately on the onset of Ukraine war, within 1 month, this administration was blaming everything on Ukraine. And I tweeted and said, it's too early to blame everything. Let us rather think about the likelihood that this war will last a long time and have an effect.
Pushing the measures,
and put some measures in place.
So there's those who also question the timing of our decision to go to the IMF. Would it have been prudent to have gone earlier?
Even with this, what I'm reading here, I'm sure you agree with me that this is a time when, you know, things were deteriorating. And it was based on, now we know why we're having the ratings, downgrades and the rest. Yeah, because this information, you know, is out there. And this is just this 1/3. There are 2 of them. I'm still reading them. Right? Very elaborate. Article 4 gives you a very elaborate view of the situation, you know, and they tell you what is wrong with sectors like energy and whatever, and all with all these things. Yes, they go, you see, now they're into the sectors, health to response and all that. This was supposed to be. So I had Ghanaians to read this, especially the academics and the rest. The Article 4, 2021.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that we missed Article 4, 2019, which started doing the correction. And I believe that this was serious enough and started the downgrades and the rest for us probably to have taken, you know, them seriously and known that we would hit, you know, a block. We waited until, because by the time this came out, that's 2021, July. By the end of the year, we couldn't go to the market. If you remember, for the additional $2 billion US. And as we speak, we can't go to the market. Or we have said we are not going to the market. Is it IMF that is imposing that on us? So probably if after this, you know, revelations and whatever, you know, we would have gone to the fund, maybe, you know, we would have been maybe, as in the negotiations delayed, maybe 6 months into the fund program. And you know, the benefit that the fund program brings is not just the money we get from the IMF, which we normally give to, you know, Bank of Ghana as budget support, but which they, you know, with COVID and everything is now coming into the budget, right? The benefit is that then you have the World Bank, African Development Bank, and others, the development partners, you know, coming in. And there are some of these reports where they will give credit to the World Bank. They, you know, these are debt sustainability analysis and whatever, and they will give credit. So please, let's read and ask that what are the responses of our government, you know, with this, which is what we did with the homegrown. So I'm not, if I sound hard on the administration, 1, I'm defending our record. 2, I'm saying that we had opportunities. And you know, I often say that you don't prepare for a crisis during the crisis.
Should we brace ourselves for harder times?
Are we not in harder times already?
So should we brace ourselves for harder times?
I say we're in harder times already.
Because like you said, this will take, it's quite a process.
Yeah, even if we were to find solutions for this on our own, if we had a way with that, yes, it takes time.
Would you have wished that we go for a homegrown?
We knew that, you know, as I said, when we were satisfied with the measures that we were putting in place, I remember some of them required a lot of sacrifice. We were building the sinking fund because we wanted to remain on the market. At the time, crude oil prices fell. You know, at the time we had tariff bearing, but we kept faith with the PRMA. And remember, we were also doing some structural reforms, right? In preparation, GRE was created because we had 3 headquarters. We had VAT Service in charge of, the commissioner was in charge of something. We had a customs, commissioner was in charge of something, and then we had a IRS commissioner was in charge of. I remember the one who started those reforms, Professor Mills, a tax professional. So we merged it, like Kenya and the rest, because we had NRS, RAGB, and we should have taken that step, but they were weak. So we gave the Commissioner General sufficient powers, so that one person, like our president, will be held, you know, accountable, responsible. Then we merged IRS and the VAT Service, of which I was the Deputy Commissioner Coordinator before leaving the country, right, into the Domestic Tax Division of the GRA, no longer on their own. The Commissioner General is the only one who is a member of the board. It used to be that you have 3 commissioners on a board, right? You need to bring some, you know, as I say, chain of command to learn from the military and whatever leadership, right? And then we unified all the, you know, support services and created a 3rd division, which is the support service, you know, they call it support service, let me just say it. I forget the real, you know. And then, so having created this structure, we tend to strengthening the administration, which is single window, West Blue, today is ICOMS. There was a domestic tax equivalent, which was to be done from 2017. I understand now it is now that tenders, 5 years on, have been issued, you know, for it. Not just that, you remember GIFMIS? And you remember the Sinkifa and all those structures? We needed fiscal discipline. We're talking about fiscal discipline. Fiscal discipline is not just in law. So what did we do? We stopped paper warrants. My head was on the blocks, sacked by UN. You know, and we compiled a contract database because Ministry of Finance, they don't know the contracts which sector ministries and others were awarded. It was used to play politics, that we had left arrears and then they did an offset, right? So I'm saying that, and we continued with all of this, even when we had the program. In fact, we included it in the program. There's nothing that says that if you have a program with the IMF, and they agreed that this is our structural measures which we invited the World Bank, we got a loan from them to establish the GIFMIS platform. I'm saying that these are the things we need to do to get out of, you know, the situation. If we are a proud nation, let's be proud in our methodology. Let's be proud in our discipline.
I appreciate your time this morning, Mr. Tekpe. We have to let you go now, sadly. But Sir Tekpe is former finance minister, and we've been talking about government's decision to go to the IMF. He's been making reference to that particular document, the Article 4. 2021, which I urge everybody to read. Which he urges everybody to read. Thank you so much, Mr. Tekpe. So let me come to you, Prof. And thank you for holding on and allowing Mr. Tekpe to speak. So, sure, thank you, Mr. Tekpe. So, Prof, let's come back to the bigger question, which is the major concern for a lot of Ghanaians. They don't bother their head too much about the technicalities and all that. It's about the pockets, how they feel every day, whether they have enough resources to meet the demands that they have to cater for. Mr. Ponkrumah says, look, we've gone to the IMF to help us on balance of payments, ensure foreign reserves, external debts, obligations are met. It is not to solve the bigger economic problem. So what then will solve our bigger economic problem, and how do we achieve that?
So thank you very much. So I'll come to your question, but I need to, you know...
You have a lot of things to say based on...
I have to give some background.
Sure, that's okay. Please go ahead.
Simple in finance, which is an act. Finance comes between economics and accounting. So anyone who becomes whether a finance minister, a finance CFO, or a finance officer, you have four main principles that you have to focus on. Your first principle is, how do you raise funds? The second principle is, how do you allocate the funds? The third principle, how do you account for the funds? And the fourth one, which I am introducing, is how do you maintain financial sustainability? So I'll break it down from our Ghanaian perspective. You know, he was a politician, so he talks about what happened. So you ask him a question, mismanagement. Finance is also part of management, but we manage a little bit of resources, which is the cash. So what probably happened to us between the two parties, whilst one focus, the current one focus on sources of funds, you'd have seen that from Article 4, there is some lacking of accountability. There is some lacking of financial sustainability. There is some lacking of how the funds were allocated. You know, our debt has gone up because we have borrowed. That is what I am calling sources of funds. You do sources of funds from two main areas. One, either by taxation, you bring in more money, or you borrow. If you look at this government, when they came in the last, they removed some taxes they call nuisance tax. So we lost revenue. Then what they did to replace what we have lost
was to borrow from outside, international market.
Was that a prudent decision?
So that is one question we have to ask, because we are talking about financial management. You ask the question whether it is mixed management. So that is where we had a problem. We move from using our own internal resources to manage our operations as a country than to go and borrow from outside. The effect from borrowing from outside is what has caught us now. One, we borrowed more from foreign currency denominated facilities. Two, those facilities we borrowed were of high interest rate bearing. So at the time we realized as a country our debt had moved up and we didn't have the revenues to pay. So on the revenue side, which is the sources of raising the funds, we have lost out from there. I will not talk whether it is financial mismanagement, but it is, let me put it this way, it's a strategy for the finance ministers. He has a strategy, the current one has a strategy. Mostly it's depend on each of them, their background. So Setepka's background, he is from an accounting perspective. So if you listen to him, his focus was on more how do we ensure accountability. You remember I mentioned that the third leg of finance is accountability. So he was talking of all the systems they put in place, bringing the taxes authorities together, making sure that there is a single system to be able to collect the monies. His problem was how to raise money. That's why he went to IMF for that 900 and something billion, because on the expenditure side, which is how to allocate the resources, at the time or in set time, you look at, they had an issue of wage bill going up. Currently, in our time, what is really hitting us as a country is our interest payment. And our interest payment has gone up all because of the foreign denominated loans. First quarter of this year, Ghana did not borrow. But just converting, because the cedi devalued by 22%, the loan value in cedi denominated terms went up. So the question is, we didn't have money to pay. So what the current minister did was that, then let us bring in a new tax that they think will help us raise money very fast.
Which was the e-levy?
E-levy, because they just look at transactions on e-levy, which was at the time they said 900 billion, just money moving circulation. So based on that one alone, he said, okay, let me go there and tax. And politicians, you know how they do. One prevented him from allowing to get it when he needed it in January. So by the time it was approved, already we had lost out of raising the revenue. And the debt levels have been going up. So what I understand Kojo Oponkuma is saying is that at the moment, our reserves has depleted. We had $6 billion January. In April, our reserves that we have in foreign currency has come to 4 billion. Currently, a lot of foreign denominated loans are due for payment. We don't know where we are going to get the money to come and support the payment. That is why Kojo is saying that all that they are going to IMF to do is to seek balance of payment support. So this is what is really happening to us. In the accounting side, which is also important because set raised it from Article 4, which will come up, we have not been able to account for all the funds that we have.
But that's very problematic, isn't it?
That is because the negotiation is going to boil down on data. Already, signals have been given by Parliament on the COVID accountability. So what it means is that whatever data government is going to present to IMF on Wednesday going, they will have to question that data. Government should have allowed the financial management at 2016, that is at 291, to really work. But this is where we had issues. Unfortunately, we have also had an issue with our audit service in the Article 4. You know, said we use big words, so I tried to
simplify it, sure.
in Article 4, when it talks about auditing certain government institutions, is going to come up. That is why they are going to go after Cocoa Board. Because we don't understand why Cocoa Board now is having a debt problem. Is it with accountability? What information are they giving to us? So these are the measures that is going to happen in Article 4. They want to make sure that truly is what we are presenting, is it the right figures? You know, former President Mahama, in some time past, accused creative accounting. So I'm still based on my, this is simple, we teach it in class, the 4 principles. It's 3, but I've added my financial sustainability. So the accounting side is very, very important. So we may have to check how efficient is our internal audit service. Are we allowing them to operate? You know the issue of DOM level. This will come back to us again because it is the data that everybody is going to, and the data must be verified and certain by an external body who has to support it. So as we sit, if we say, yes, Ghana has a balance deficit of, say, 15% to GDP, is it really true? Are we reporting all the debts we have incurred, or is some hidden somewhere? So these are the issues that the fund is really going to consider. So on the last part, which is the financial sustainability, if I listen to Seth, he tried in his time to talk about setting up some reserves in terms of funding. So they had the reserves that was related to our oil revenue and all those reserves. What they were trying to do was to give us financial sustainability. But he's mentioning that currently we have gone to use 400 million out of that. So it's also a problem that then there is a problem. So if you listen to Kojo Ponkroma, he's trying to say that we are going to IMF all because, for me, we have gone against these 4 principles of purely simple finance. And what we need now is that what IMF is coming to do, for me, in my perspective, IMF solves your now problem now.
Yeah.
They will not solve your problem for the future. Now what we need is, we need balance of payment support. That is what IMF is going to give. But IMF will have to understand why we got ourselves in the first place. And that is where the accountability will come in. That is where your auditing will come in. So we may have to give that proof to IMF that, yes, whatever we are giving to you is certain. It have been, you remember, in a set time, they were surcharged for not disclosing some. It may play again this, because this time we have to open up to the whole world that this is our true nature of our situation. Last part is on the allocation of the resources, which is the expenditure. We realize that we have spent a lot of money during COVID period. And you are spending without having the needed revenue to support it. So how do we spend and on what? Major issues that will come up in this IMF negotiation is the issue of sole sourcing. In Zambia, the IMF asked them to set up a new act that opens up contracts even before a contract is given. It's not like you have in Ghana, it's only on website and that. No. Now it may have to be more open, so that nobody, one person will say because it's urgent and you give so, because that is where we have lost a lot of revenue. Monies that we could have used to do certain things, we have used it for sole sourcing. In the last in this current government, that was one of their, that when they come, and you remember the president
there was a ministry.
Yeah, the president even gave us some computation of savings he has made without not going to source sources. So we ask ourselves,
why are we back there?
Why? That's the question.
Prof, I'll come back to you. Let me get on to Zoom. Gideon Io is a tax partner with Deloitte Ghana. Thank you so much for joining the program, sir. We also have Seth Chumakwabwa, who is CEO of Association of Ghana Industries. And thank you as well for joining us. So let me start with you, Mr. Akwabwa. We've heard from the TUC. They say we are not in for this whole IMF arrangement because we feel that it is going to put more pressure on the Ghanaian public sector worker. For the AGI, what is your position on this move by government? Hello, Mr. Akwabwa. Hello? Do we have Mr. Akwabwa on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, great. So I was just finding out from you what the AGI's position on government's move is.
Well, AGI, we have businesses. And for businesses, we need stability to enable us to plan. We need stability in the macroeconomic environment when it comes to interest rates. We need stability when it comes to the policy rate. We need stability in inflation so you can have a clear plan. Because when you're getting investors to partner you in business, they want to have a clear, predictable environment. When you are importing raw materials to produce, you want to be sure that by the time you finish production, you are able to pay back the facility and the raw material you imported. So for us, our number one priority is a predictable business environment. Now, the situation we find ourselves is a difficult situation, difficult in the sense that we all know what is happening in recent times. Oil prices are going up, cost of feed is going up, inflation is skyrocketing, interest rate, policy rate is 19%, so interest rate will be in the range of 25-30%. These are all critical challenges that's affecting business, and therefore we need a solution. And for us, any prescription that will help stabilize the situation and make the business environment more conducive is welcomed. Under the circumstance, unfortunately, we wish we wouldn't have come to this point. But here we are. We have a challenge in the economy. We have a problem with macroeconomic stability. And therefore, for AGI, we don't think that at this stage we have a choice. And therefore, we have no problem government seeking the IMF intervention to bring stability into the system.
Don't have a problem at all with this decision, right? Basically.
Well, the principle, we don't have a problem with it because in principle, going to IMF, that will bring, I mean, as I said, we would have loved that we have not gotten to this point because I think we're doing pretty well at a certain point. Then the over expenditure, created all the problems. Then we have external shocks also coming in. So all these have contributed to the challenge we have today. And we wish we wouldn't have come to this point so that we use our own homegrown solution to solve our problems instead of always resorting to the IMF. But we've reached a critical point where without such intervention, we'll probably have more problems. What we would have loved to see all these years, and we AGI keep talking about it, part of the reason why we are in this situation is because we are so import dependent. We are not producing much in this country. We are importing virtually everything. And therefore, when you are so import dependent, you are actually importing inflation into your system. Any external shocks, you feel it so strongly because you are highly dependent on the imports. So what we would have loved to see is how we grow the local industries, how we link agriculture effectively to industry, how we grow agriculture, and then link it to service, so that we have all these key productive sectors growing, employing our people. When we get to that situation, the external shocks will not be felt so much. If oil prices are going up, it may go up all right, but cost of free shouldn't go up that much because we are not importing so much. If exchange rate, we have external challenges, exchange rate will not be that hitting because we will not need that much dollar or foreign currency to be imported. This is where we should get to. Unfortunately, we are not at that point. We are importing a lot, and therefore we feel every external shock that happens in the environment. And this is where we are. So at this particular point, it's like being on a sick bed. What you want to be able to do is to swallow a bitter pill to get out of the sick bed, and then you can plan your life. And this is where we are. And therefore, in principle, we cannot say no to the IMF intervention.
We know how this may directly affect public sector workers, because we saw that in the last program where there was a freeze on salaries, there was a freeze on employment into the public sector. But tell us over the years how Ghana's decision to go to the IMF has affected the private sector and industries, and what this current decision could possibly, the impact it could possibly have on industries.
Well, there are always two sides to the coin. On one hand, you need IMF intervention to bring stability, to bring credibility, to bring confidence in the economy, such that your CD will not be depreciating. And when you have that aspect, it's also positive to the economy. On the other hand, for you to do so, you must have a certain discipline. And I think that's what IMF brings into bear. That if you want to go for IMF and you want to seek our intervention, then have a certain discipline. Control your expenditure. And one way to control the expenditure is perhaps control the size of people you employ, the wage level and all that. So those effects are normally there. But I think that if you really want to have the best benefits out of the situation, you need a stability. That is fine. But how you channel, how you negotiate for the IMF intervention is critical. For us, if you are negotiating, there are certain areas that you can look at. What do you do to ensure that the intervention that is coming is going to support your productive sector? Because we know government sector cannot create all the jobs we need in this country. Government employs only a few people. So when you support the private sector to grow, when you support agriculture, and you are absorbing large numbers in agriculture, industry creates a lot of jobs, and you are supporting industry to grow, the problem of government putting a freeze on employment will not be too much of a problem, because you would have a thriving private sector that is growing and is employing more people and providing effective wage and stronger, better employment to people. So I think it is all how it is negotiated. In the past, sometimes our negotiations have challenges. And it's also because we go into the IMF at the time that we have serious challenges. And therefore, to come out of that challenge is so difficult. By the time you come out of it and come out of the program, you will still not have, you may have stabilized your system, but the real growth that you want to have, the structural transformation may not have happened. And that's what is happening to us. We go in when we are in crisis. So you go and you get stability. Beyond the stability, what do? We are not transforming our structure. Our structure has remained the same. Very import dependent, exports of primary products, export of cocoa, gold, and the rest. Little small volumes of exports of non-traditional products. Those are the areas we need to critically look at. So if you are going for such a program, how do we channel the resources and the energy such that we solve this fundamental problem? In this case, if you do so and you do it very well, freeze unemployment will not become a major issue, because private sector is the one employing a lot more people. And then the few that are employed in the public sector will get the right living wages that will also make them comfortable.
The information minister made during his conversation with my colleague MFR Pau, saying that the IMF will not solve our bigger economic problem. And he gave some pointers as to what we'll be doing besides the IMF program to ensure, like you just mentioned, that we are tackling the general economic problem. And he mentioned private sector development, like you've just mentioned, and also increasing our domestic resource mobilization. Let me come to you, Gideon Ayo, who is a tax partner at Deloitte Ghana. How do we ensure that we are able to achieve these two major issues that he raised while running the program, so that people don't say, like in some instances, we went to the IMF, but it's failed and we are back to square one?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity to be on your program. And with this question, I think I would like to go back to 2015, when we had similar discussions about to enter into the IMF program again. And most of these topics or issues coming up came then up that time. And one of the things which came out was about keeping fiscal responsibility. And so Ghana enacted the Fiscal Responsibility Act at 982, I think. And we're supposed to keep all these things in check to make sure that what made us enter the IMF program then will not occur again. Because if you check Ghana's progress since 2000 to now, you find out we've sort of been in a cycle, the boom and bust. So high commodity prices, when there's an external shock, all these things occur again. And so this Fiscal Responsibility Act was supposed to ensure that this does not happen. And unfortunately, it has happened. And part of the reason, there are so many reasons I cannot explain, but one of it was the fact that we entered into some periods of shocks. And I think as the AGI president has just shared, Ghana, we are very much import dependent. We are linked globally, and there's can we say there's later or something that we have to think about how to decouple these external pressures and making sure that it doesn't affect us negatively. And these are the questions to me that I think we have to start asking as a question, because we tried the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Unfortunately, it had the suspension rules where I think the deputy minister was in parliament to suspend it because we were in a crisis. And unfortunately, just when we were exiting the crisis, we've had Russia-Ukraine. But the fact is, we cannot say that the crisis will always be affecting us. We shouldn't carry out our development plan. So for me, I'll reframe the question and say that how should we try to decouple ourselves from this external shock so that as and when they happen every now and then, it wouldn't affect us so much. I think last week, the European Central Bank was saying something that we're in a new era whereby high inflation is likely to be a thing, and that it's not going to be going away anytime soon. So it looks like in the long term, we have to really brace ourselves and put in place the right structure so that as and when these cycles of boom and bust occurs, we would ensure that it doesn't affect us negatively and affect our developmental projects.
Interesting. So some of these right structures, what would you recommend, even as we go into this IMF program?
Well, I think that's the IMF. Well, I can suggest a couple. I think the IMF basically is coming to create fiscal space. And then we also had some of the government's flagship projects which were ongoing. But I think a more study need to be made around it to see how it could reduce our import dependency, so that we'll end up creating jobs locally in the country and ensure that when these global shocks occur to our commodity prices, etc., our importation of goods, etc., it will not create the inflationary processes that we have here. Government also needs more revenue, and that's a fact. Every government needs revenue, especially in an instance where we've had high expenditure in this case. So the tax base has to be looked at again. But we all know there has been so much discussions around this side, and asking what can the government do now. And I think one of the areas that government can look at is property taxes. And I know this has been the pipeline for a while, and I understand there's a management system being put in place to ensure that we'll set up these property taxes to sort of bridge the revenue expenditure gap. And I think the Institute of Fiscal Studies did a study somewhere in 2018 where they said government stands to make around 150 million USD every year from property taxes. So I think this is an area that has to be looked at. In a way, it ends up extending the tax base without putting pressure on the same businesses that usually end up paying all the taxes.
Let me come back to the studio, Prof. So there's a story on the front page of the Daily Dispatch. Going to IMF will restore confidence. That's according to Professor Korti. Let me just bring details of that and ask if you share in his opinion. The director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, ISA, Professor Peter Korti, has described government's decision to go to the IMF as a move that will gradually bring back investor confidence into Ghana's economy. According to him, going to the IMF will send a signal to investors that Ghana will follow strict fiscal measures to attain economic growth. Quote, let us be real. Going through a program doesn't start immediately. I beg your pardon. You have to start slowly and then get the results in the future, but definitely you would build investor confidence for Ghana. End quote. Professor Korte stated that the country needs to boost investor confidence to attract funding into key sectors of the economy.
So I agree with him. So let me, sometimes we use the word physical discipline. So simply put, we are going to reduce our expenditure. Or let me say it in the way that Ghanaians, we cut our coat according to our size. If the revenues that we'll be able to generate is 10 billion, let's do our planning and expenditure within 10 billion. IMF coming is going to help us to be financially disciplined. That is what is currently missing.
So I mean, I'll allow you to proceed. So is it the case then that on our own as a sovereign nation, without the supervision of the IMF, we cannot, or we have shown over time that we are not capable of being disciplined?
So it comes to the promises we make when we are doing politics. I remember Ghana tried to come out with a 50-year development plan. If we had a plan that whether party A or party B comes and they all work within, that will be better. But what is currently happening is that the promises we are making as a country on the political platforms are the ones that are pushing us to spend more than what we have. Mostly, as I mentioned again, because we lack accountability. The party who is trying to come into government does not have the true picture of the pot, of the finance pot, so he makes promises. The one who is already in government also will portray that there's a lot of money. So I'm also going to promise a lot. So this is where it pushes us to spend. So sometimes you get somebody from outside, or even if it's within, like the Internal Audit Service, will now caution you that you are going overboard. Like the Statistical Service, anytime they come out with figures to tell you quarterly report, monthly report, government you must know that you are going overboard, so you have to slow down. But if you don't slow down, and you follow on all the political promises you want to do within a year or within your term of office, you will realize that you have gone overboard.
So we are taking political decisions at the expense of sound economic decisions.
That is the problem. So I'll give you a typical example. So it was a good policy when government said it was going to build hospitals 100. First it was 88. And now it went to 111. Because the government assessed the situation and realized that we need a lot of medical facilities across the country to solve a problem. That was needed. But the next question is, where were you going to get the funds to do them? The government planned to do it within a year. Yes, government is trying to solve a problem which was very urgent, but then because of the political expediencies of winning the next election and winning the heart, so government says, oh, then we started putting in monies into design and something while we have not even acquired the land from each of the districts. So these are some of the issues, and I talk about allocation of resources. So that is when, if you are the minister, you may have to plan very well that you make sure that where you are allocating the resources, within 6 months, because you operate within 4 years, you'll be able to get some returns. You don't put your money into something that will not contribute to the growth of the economy, will not bring employment, will only benefit a few, and you want to make sure that. So these are the issues at stake. So it is that discipline that we are lacking. So as we are meeting IMF, they ask us to bring the programs. What are the programs? One district, one factory. It's a program. It is a good program for structural adjustment program in the country. If government has focused more on that program, we would have changed our economic structure. Currently, Our structure is based on service, followed by agriculture and manufacturing. Government, that policy was very good. That we were going to make sure that at least we have a factory at each district. One, you create employment. You also make sure that after employment, you create goods and services for people to buy. So like now we know Akonfi is exporting outside the country. Why couldn't do it at the one at Bonohafu for the cashew industry? So it is a resource allocation. Where did government decide to put his money? You have your own program which could have turned the economy around, but you didn't put your money at that place. You rather put it at certain sectors.
So we have, like you've mentioned, one district, one factory. We had the dams. We had free SHS. Would you have prescribed that government rather focuses on, for example, maybe free SHS and the 1D, 1F, then pump all the needed resources there instead of spreading, you know, its resources so wide?
So that is so you have to make a mark within the 4-year term. You cannot solve all the problems. So what can let you stand out among all the leaders that have been in Ghana? That 1D, 1F program, I mean, it could have turned the fortunes of Ghana. You go to my hometown, Enginesu, which is known for granite, and we have a granite paste factory in my hometown. It could have turned the fortunes for people at Ejura, such Encroachment, and all those areas. It could have turned such a Dumasi, and that's what they do. And your name will be known for at least one district. The school feeding, that program, even free education, is a good program. That alone could have helped. But we decided to touch here, touch there, trying to satisfy a lot of people. But now, that is why we are struggling. Because just imagine, 270 or something districts, each one has a factory. Each factory is even employing at least 100 people. Talk about those who are going to provide the raw materials, the chain. It could have changed the fortunes of the country. IMF is coming. What IMF is going to do is that we are going to talk about structural adjustment program. Well, it simply means, I don't like using big words. Your economy is on service. That is why you are importing. Can you turn it into production? That program 1D, 1F would have solved the problem. But we did not look at it. On the education side, I like what is happening, that we are now focusing on TVET and STEM. Though I train as an accountant, but if you ask me, in my time, a lot of people are now doing accounting, they are not finding the employment. But if people are in the sciences, mathematics, IT, and the rest, on their own, they can create employment. We are asking the youth to go into employment. All that they are going to do is that they are going to sit and import to come and sell. So all the youth in Ghana currently are into buy and sell. Where do they get the goods? It's from outside. That is why the importation bill is going up. But if we would have turned this around, so just focus on at least one district, one factory, the school, free SHS program, then you can focus on the health. On the health sector, we could have turned Ghana around to be a place where people will come. They call it health tourism. At least the president could make a name and it will never go away. But now, 1DF is struggling because we are now asking anyone who wants to go to a bank and we will just give you a collateral, which we will suffer. The banks will, the restrictions there is the same thing they will apply. But if government is the one giving, and making sure that some people are monitoring, getting it done like they have done for Akonfi, how can it be done for other factories?
Prof, I mean, just like the CEO of AGI mentioned, we are a very import-driven economy. I remember during the height of the pandemic, when the president was encouraging us to eat a lot more local food, there was such a mad rush for locally produced rice. And there was a drive and there was a campaign for people to buy rice that is grown in the country. yes, I know that for some products, you don't have them locally, you'd have to import. But let's take rice as an example. And even in Nigeria, as it's done. I mean, per my experience, it's very difficult to find imported rice in Nigeria because there's a deliberate attempt to allow the rice market there to thrive. So beyond putting the structures in place, what other policy decisions can government take to ensure that the local industries here also survive? Because in some instances, even though some of the products are imported, sometimes they're cheaper because of cheap labor outside and where they're coming from. So the competition is not so fair for the local producers here. You get my point. So besides putting in the policies 1D, 1F, you know, helping local producers and manufacturers, what other policy decisions must be taken to ensure that they don't have unfair competition from
My name is Echo.
Products that are imported?
So the taxation policy is there for government to use to make sure that you save your country. So you mentioned Nigeria. I've been there a couple of times. So the rice you eat there, they tell you it's hard. When they started, they were complaining, but now they are used to. From the statistics, they say about 50% of the rice we can produce locally. Can we have a plan on how to slow down with taxation on the importation of rice? I know the rice producers will also come out with the argument that when they need the quantities, they will not get. But we must have a conscious effort. Do you know that now, tuber, yam, Ghana is exporting yam. So can we try to find a way to change our economy in such a way that instead of become rice eaters, we are now eating our yam? In that case, we will help to grow, eat what we grow. I remember that I think when Asabi, what's his name? Yes. In Joy's studio, there was a time we had this, and he said that we should eat what, and he mentioned plantain and the rest. Indeed, it's true. If we change our taste from having foreign goods more than, and then be able to add the proper packaging and make sure that our Food and Drug Board authorities, our regulatory authorities are helping us to make sure that we meet the standards, I'm sure a lot of things will change in the country. So just focus using the taxation to make sure that we slow down the importation. The wage bill, as the Kodjo is talking about, balance of payment. Most of them is the rice payment, sugar, and the rest that we are paying. Is it that we cannot produce them? We know the story between the two political parties on the sugar factory at Commander. We know how to solve it, but as I mentioned, the politics of it is what is preventing us to take the decisions that we are supposed to take to solve our problem.
Let me throw the same question to Mr. Chuma Kwabwa, if we still have him on, the CEO of the AGI. So there are concerns about how our system doesn't favor local producers. On the other side, there are those who say, well, the local producers are not able to meet the demands, and so it's better if we stick to importation. I've used rice as an example here. What will your response be? And this is all still tied to the IMF program, because, well, the information minister says we need to develop private sector in order to ensure that there's general economic turnaround. So from where you sit, what is a true story? Are we able, manufacturers here in Ghana, able to produce to meet our demands? And if not, what exactly is causing that dependence on importation? Oh, too bad. I'm told we lost him, but we have Dr. Joseph Obing, who is president of GUTA. It's good to hear from him as well. We've heard from the TUC, we've heard from the AGI. Let's now hear from GUTA. Finally, we're told we're going to the IMF. Are you excited or not?
I would have wished that we use homegrown solutions to solve our problem. Having learned so many lessons in the past, having gone to IMF, we all say that it didn't help us in the past. But that was not to be. I made my case known. I'm doing an interview with Graphic Corporation that we could have done better if we would have pruned down our expenditure, if we have prioritized our needs. As a nation, I think we do so many things at a time. We do not prioritize our needs and then work effectively towards them. And that we do not also ensure value for money, contracts and all that. And so whatever limited resources that we have, the expenditure of it is not done with prudence. And that's what we wanted the government to apply homegrown solutions by way of scrutinizing our expenditure and then pruning down the expenditure and then looking through some of the social interventions and see where we can reduce or where we can even eliminate so that the limited resources can do much better for us. But that was not to be. Probably the managers of the economy knew best and probably we have hit the dead end. If that is so, then there's nothing that the government can do than to rely on foreign sources to come to our rescue. And if that will help us to come and stabilize the economy, especially regard with the forest and all that, then we'll have to embrace it. And then, but we still have to wait for the details. Because sometimes we say we are going to IMF, and what we have on the table is just too scanty. And then the restrictions that goes with it is such that you cannot also manage yourself in other areas where you could have done normally. So those restrictions and all that, if that is not taken, will become very bad for the country itself. Can we say that it's a necessary evil? Yeah, we can say that because once we are here and that we are saying that we have to apply physical discipline and all that, we are not able to do. So if foreigners will come and tell us to apply the same physical discipline for us to do or for us to comply, then I think no lessons that learned in the first instance when we went.
Dr. Obeng, you mentioned the conditionalities and restrictions. We've heard from the TUC and we know how our previous program affected the public sector. But are you able to share with us if GUTA has in any way suffered as a result of previous IMF programs that we were engaged in?
Normally, they are for the generality of the economy. And so I will not single-handedly put GUTA, but then whatever affect the general economy, then also trickle down on us. I think that's what we say. But then if they come and say that we have to enhance on our revenue collection, already we have been doing, new taxes have been introduced to us. Some of them have been increased. So this is not a new area to us, the traders. So if we are going to enhance on revenue collection, we have always been in it. The burden have been on how to manage prudently this the revenue that we get. And if we are not able to manage this revenue well, it brings us down, back. So we are just dancing in a cycle. And so it's not difficult for us to enhance on our revenue, but the problem, the pain has been that we do not manage our resources in a manner that will suit the resources that we have. And that this is exactly what IMF is going to put to bear.
I appreciate your time here this morning, Dr. Joseph Obeng is with Guta, and he's been sharing his thoughts on government's decision to go to the IMF. Quickly, we'll be wrapping up this conversation, but it will be time to hear what you have to say once I'm done with my guests. Do stay on. We will be putting out the phone numbers to hear what your thoughts are on government's decision, and also the back and forth, the initial stance by the finance minister that we were not going to go to the IMF, and what we are seeing now, and your general concerns about the economy. Let me wrap up with you, Prof. And I'll make reference to that conversation again with my colleague, MFR Pau, that conversation with the information minister. So there are concerns that there's a challenge with the general living conditions of Ghanaians, and we are told that, well, even with the food, the hike in prices we're seeing on the markets is directly linked to the cost of fuel. And so people, even though the product itself may not be expensive coming from the farm, transporting it then results in the high cost of the product. Now, he says there's no money to subsidize fuel, and indeed mentioned that there were some margins, not the taxes, some margins on fuel that were taken off. But once again, this government insists that the impact of the global crisis was so severe that these interventions couldn't help the Ghanaian. And so even though there are interventions, it couldn't work because of the global crisis. For you, sitting as a professor of finance and looking at the general economy of Ghana, does this excuse really wash for you? The issue of the global crisis and COVID, and whether or not really it is the true cause and the actual cause of our current economic problem?
I would say it is not, if I should put it in percentages, the external factors is about 20%. 80% are from within the decisions we have taken as a country. So I'm in sometime just after the budget in 2021, when the finance minister presented his data, I looked at it, and on Joy FM, I said we may have to seek liquidity support, because it was very clear that even that period, our interest payment alone was taking all the revenues that we are going to generate as a country. So the signals were there. Let's ask ourselves, COVID came in, what we have not been able to assess how much in terms of impact to our GDP. But then we can mention the over 22 billion cedis we received as funds from elsewhere for COVID support. So it is a major issue that we as a country cannot say that everything is happening because of externalities. We had the option to make sure that we raise our own internal revenue and then reduce our expenditure. But this did not happen. So if Kojo is saying that we are in the situation because of externalities, that is not true. The figures point to it that we borrowed a lot with high interest rate bearing, and also depletion of our international reserves. They were the major issues. We could have said, because of COVID, some programs, policies, we will stop or slow it down. But we did not.
But what about, and back to the COVID, so what about government's decision to relieve citizens of the impact of COVID? We know there were some subsidies on utilities. We know there was sharing of food, support given in terms of, even for small-scale industries and all that.
That is what has brought us, if I will tell you the truth, that is what has brought us to this stage. The water bill that government paid. Personally, I have an experience. During that period, my house, we used like 80 cedis. I can show you a text message saying that my water bill that came to my was 7,000 cedis and government paid.
So you think there's been some looting somewhere?
It forced me to go to Dodowa to go and bring the water company. They dug my house to see if there were leakages. There was no leakage. So, how do you call it? PURC, they have all the information that a lot of things happened. I can talk of my institution, my former Valley View, things that happened, we had to go to PURC to go and get it sorted out.
So it was an avenue for milking the state? Eh?
This is what... allow everybody to pay. We pay, and then you use the money for something else. It was good to give the food, but to pay for my water and my electricity, where it gives room for people to use the system, manipulate the system. These are some of the issues. And as they are doing it in Parliament, a lot will come out. That 22, or now government says it's 19. If they should add the covered fund, what they receive, it gets to about 22 billion. You know 22 billion. Our debt is 400, going to 400 billion, and you have 22 billion. We could have done a lot of things with it. But the way we did the allocation, I don't want to use some words, the way we did the allocation of that resources, they were not efficient. That is why we are struggling as a country to account for it. Because I mentioned the main four principles of finance. You source for the funds, you have the funds, you allocate it well to efficient areas, and then you account for the funds. And then you make sure, in my terms, you create financial sustainability. These principles, which are purely finance, we got it wrong.
Do you also get a sense that there's no clear-cut direction when it comes to Ghana's economic management? So once again, I'll bring the issue of the finance minister, his deputy, now the back and forth and government's decision to go back. In fact, this is what Kojo Nkrumah said in response to that. He cited an example of the broadcasting bill. He says, as information minister, he can say, for example, XYZ will not be captured in the bill, but he will go back to cabinet, make a presentation. The president can make an ultimate decision because he's a president and he has executive powers. So that's the scenario, or that's the analogy he creates in relation to what has happened in this situation. So the finance minister makes an emphatic statement as the substantive minister in charge of our finances, and then goes to cabinet, makes a proposal based on other interventions from experts. The president makes a final decision. Do you get a sense that we know what we're doing with the economy, or this is a trial and error, touch and go thing for you?
So, simply put, we don't have the data to take the economic decisions. I'm just basing on my the principles. The accountability part, before the finance minister can make some utterances, it must be based on some facts. And that facts must be known by him and his deputies.
Maybe E-Levy disappointed, because based on their projections and what they were expecting, we wouldn't have need to go to the IMF.
Based on that projection, you remember, the finance minister said it was going to be the savior, 7 billion. But the people asked, how can 7 billion be your savior? These are the issues. The data needed to give to maybe from the finance minister to the deputy to the president, there is some kind of alteration somewhere which is preventing them to have one opinion. We may decide to vote and say this is where we are going, but it must be based on facts, the data. So if the data that finance minister is basing on this argument and saying we are not going to IMF, because at the time he knew E-Levy will be coming in, based on the Minister for Rules, he said it was going to be collateralized. Just remember,
I was just about to say
I predicted that even before he came out.
Do you get a sense that there's a lot of suppression of facts and information surrounding our economic situation?
I mean, honestly, that is why I've been saying that. I'm trying to use nice words. That accountability part, the data for making decisions is an issue. You see, that is why government, if you remember, there's an IMF program on making sure that most of government agencies are on electronic platforms. So that if government want information and is trying to get it from your ministry and you are delaying, they will go to that platform and get the information and take the decision. And the government forces everybody, make sure you put your financial information there. That is the Public Financial Management Act. But you will see that that act is not fully enforced. So some agencies and ministries are still not putting their information on that platform for government or the minister to get it for the information that he needs to take. So the minister will be just looking at that platform and say that Ministry of Road and let's say roads, he knows that the debt that he has to pay is 80 billion. Not knowing there is about 20 somewhere which has not been uploaded on the platform. So this is where we have that information. So government may have to work fast. Hopefully, now we are moving into analytical world where softwares and are coming up. Just a click, you can see the global picture of your country. Maybe government may have to deploy something like that, so that the minister will be able to get the exact information needed. Have you seen that sometimes the president will say A on a figure, then the finance minister will go and say a different figure, and now the finance minister has to go back and say, oh, we are sorry for, and then he used a big brofo English to. That is the problem. Getting the data to make the decision is not there. So we need to build a proper data center for taking.
But we have one. You've mentioned it. So what exactly is our problem? So you've mentioned this database where people are supposed to, agencies and ministries are supposed to upload information to help gather data for this. I remember, and in fact, it's one of the reasons why this government has been very hard on this digitalization drive. Because the vice president said, look, we are not able to make proper projections because we don't have the right data. So they admit that there's a problem and they've tried to solve it. But we're still at square one. So
because implementation, you may have to go with the implementation plan. I'm sure not all the ministries, MDAs, district assemblies are on the platform up to date. As Setekwa mentioned, some aspect for 5 years we are now even calling for tender to make sure that we have the platform working. So this is the problem. We need to make sure that a lot of IT services companies within Ghana, and this is where you create the employment, get them together to make sure they develop the database where to get the information. And when you sit and you are presenting a figure to the president data will be the same as the finance minister, the vice president data. And it's not time for us to come back this. So as Setekwa did, you know, he didn't come with his own data because he knew it would be questioned. So now he went to IMF and said everybody should go there and read. So the question is, why? Decision making are based on the data. Bank of Ghana will come out with this quarterly report. You take Bank of Ghana data, you go and take Ministry of Finance data, and you see differences. So I sit as an analyst and I ask myself, which one do I use? Then I'll say, I'll use Bank of Ghana. I will not use Ministry of Finance. And sometimes you mention some figures, then people will enjoy it from you, have experienced it. So you pick a data from World Bank, you use it, and then there's a counter tell you, no, you got it wrong. So these are the issues. So we need to build that data for decision making. In that case, there will be oneness among the ministers. They will speak with one voice. Once they go for a meeting and they vote that this is the direction we are going, because the data is speaking. Even if you don't support it, this is where the data is driving us to. And this will help us to get our problem solved. But as I said, most of the, you pick the figures, you put it together, then we only put the subjective part of it without coming out with the real data. So like, I like what Setekwa did today. He was just going by
the facts.
The facts.
So finally, and in 1 minute, Doc, Where do we go from here? Now we know that the IMF is the only option, so we are going. But what is the next step after accessing this program in order to ensure that the reasons we went there in the first place, the reasons or the reasons we went there in the first place are achieved and we succeed with the program, and also we ensure that we're doing the other things that will affect the general economic situation?
So I'll use just 2 words: financial discipline. That is all that we need as a country. If we are disciplined, we will not need somebody to tell us. So if we know our revenue can help us to achieve this, let's work within our means as a country. It is good we can promise based on political issues, but when we go and face the reality, let's go back and tell them, yes, we will do our program, but because of what we have, we want to discipline ourselves and do the program within a certain period of time. That is what we need as a country, financial discipline.
I appreciate your time this morning. Dr. William Pepra is an Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University in the United States of America. We also heard from Gideon Ayuobu, a tax partner at Deloitte Ghana. Seth Chumakwabwa, CEO of the AGI, also joined us. We had Joseph Obing, who is President of GUTA. Earlier, we heard from former Finance Minister Seth Tekpe, who shared quite a lot with us. If you missed any part, just get onto our Facebook page and you can watch that again. Once the program has ended, it will be uploaded. Don't go away yet. When I come back, I'll be hearing from you how all of this affects you and your thoughts on government's decision to go to the IMF. Do stay.
So the Minister for Sanitation and Water Resources, the Honorable Cecilia Abena Dapa, led a task force right around here to stop what turned out to be illegal sand winning just along the buffer zone of the Wager water treatment plant. Well, just months on, the destruction that had been caused by these illegal miners is still reeling and impacting the environment. What's more, encroachment on the buffer just along the Wager River also continues in earnest. Mr. Moses, Moses is one of the residents just around here, going to talk to us about the situation.
Like 10 years.
10 years. In the side of Oyo. Main town. Down.
Down.
Okay. Okay. So when I knew about Naboya, I mean, of you, I'm not called Chote.
I mean, Chote.
Say no to Mina Cafe.
Aquachuni.
Akewachuni. Men of Jumanaka.
Aqua flow. Flow concrete.
Okay. Went you. About flow. Went you. Okay. Okay. Ne tereng benai.
Oh, na chagavo.
Okay.
Tabwa
na acha gravel ni yo BNA. Okay.
Ni yo me ni na njura.
Okay. Ewo ni acha back na acha kefe ake ya. Te afi den bo wa na bi.
Oh, akete ya ameji hotel.
Oh, down ni yo jemefen, chujien ni yo jemefen kefe ame tejien bi te na kefe yo.
Awo dabi.
Ekumemu.
Ama heo ye. To BP ama heo mena granite.
Okay.
BP ama heo mena blocking.
Okay.
Yeah, ina chuo ye.
Okay.
Chije bienele. Bakuni mimba chuni okwa chuni ya biene.
So he tells me these rocks are sourced from parts of the cliff which were being blasted and carted away by illegal sand miners. It had to take a visit by the Sanitation and Water Resources Minister, to stop them, but they left behind these huge rocks which he's breaking. What he's working on now will be used to cast concrete down the cliff where the buildings are fast springing up. He also admits that even though there's a greenbelt demarcation, some of these new developers are encroaching the buffer and eating deep into the greenbelt.
How is that? But I feel encroaching. Hello. Okay. So now we're attempting to descend this particular cliff, which leads us deep into the green belt, or if you like, the buffer zone of the Wager Lake. And it's quite a steep slope. And this is not something that we actually do every day. But fortunately, we have been able to come down. And as I was explaining, this is a very, very steep slope, which requires a lot of tact to be able to descend. Fortunately, we've got that tact and we are down here. Let's go deep into the buffer. Great. So we've just gotten down the valley, just a couple of meters to the Wager Lake, and this is where we're having quite a number of structures springing up, including, this is a single room. I reckon this is actually for somebody who lives here. And then also just to my left, there's a block factory which actually produces cement blocks for construction in the entire area. We're told that a lot of the people who are actually building around this enclave do purchase their blocks from here. So it seems and really has fit the categorization of a new site, and is just fast developing. I'm just going to speak to these people who were just meeting.
Nimba biene tomo 2 years mine. Ni weja bie amame no shkon. Amame ho shkon kahami.
Me mean na ke red angma stop work. Yeah, wall here ke paint.
Weja ni na municipal bie amamba na.
Okay. Me drag ne kachuni e bie. Aka machu e bie.
Aka machu e bie.
Okay. Ni aka machu e bie. Me no nya machu e bie.
Be no wote na me yake bona ameyake bie na aka machu e bie. Si uni wo na wo je si umo wo pay no kofi ka ha me danu.
Aha na mo.
Onukpa ni yo jeme.
Assembly.
Assembly.
Okay.
Bona.
Wa me hanya receipt alo.
Receipt.
Ingme receipt ayo.
Mama wo ko.
Wa nya wo receipt ke ba ko ni nke.
That's my colleague Manuel there, bringing us joy in your community. It's now time to hear what you have to say about the major issue we've been discussing today, and it's about government's decision to go to the IMF for support. We've been hearing a lot from government, the information minister. I keep saying the finance minister, I don't know why. Maybe, hopefully we'll get him here one of these days. The information minister, Kojopo Nkrumah, was in our studios last evening to share with us government's position and why the U-turn to go to the IMF. Let's hear what you have to say. The numbers are on your screen: 0302 211 691 extension 2, 0302 211 691 extension 2. Let's hear what you have to say. Are you for those who think that, well, we must take the bitter pill since we find ourselves in this situation, or you think we can still manage a homegrown policy devoid of certain conditionalities that will be imposed on us by the IMF if we still go ahead with that program? I'll be glad to take your thoughts here and share them with the rest of the world. But while I wait for you to call, we were receiving a lot of live engagement while we had our earlier conversation with our panelists and the former finance minister thought while the program was ongoing. And we'll quickly take that while we wait for your calls to come through and also hear what others have been saying about this decision by government. Okay, so even before I get to that, we've received our caller, Dennis, first caller, Dennis from Abu-Baidoo. Hello, Dennis. Good morning. Let's hear you.
Good morning, madam.
Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, my issue has to do with the finance minister. morally, he must resign. Actually, the man must resign. He must totally resign. I totally lose respect for that man.
Why should he resign? Why should he resign?
He should resign because there is so much inconsistency about the statement he made. You promised Ghanaians that probably we are not going to IMF. Based on what? What were your figures before you came out to promise Ghanaians that we were not going to IMF? So actually, I don't see the reason why this man, if you can do the honorable thing and resign. For me, NDC and MPP, they are the same gearbox. The same gearbox, madam. So I don't think this man deserves to be there. He must probably resign.
And if he doesn't resign, do you side with those who say the president must sack him?
Well, that should be the best thing for him to decide. You shouldn't even wait for the president to sack him. He should resign. He should do the honorable thing. For me, I totally lose respect for that man.
I appreciate your contribution to the program this morning. That's Dennis joining us from Ablekuma. Okidoke. So we'll still wait for more calls to come through, but while we do that, Ibrahim is joining the program. Hello, Ibrahim. Thank you for joining us. You're joining from the Bono East region. Let's hear you.
Yeah, Bono region.
Let's hear you, please. Hello, Ibrahim.
Yeah, good morning, madam.
Good morning. Please go ahead and make your contribution.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Good morning, madam. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. All I want to say is the inconsistency of this government is too much. Very honorable. The president should tell Ghanaians that he cannot lead the country as is and resign honorably. Because right from the presidency to the ministry to the appointees, the whole thing goes into IMF. Hello?
Ibrahim, please go ahead. We're listening to you.
What is going to this IMF as a bad all the economists,
All right, it appears we have a problem with Ibrahim's line. Let me go to Takrade now, where Arimeyao is joining us from. Let's hear you, sir. Well, too bad. Looks like we lost Arime out there. Okay, so we've got comments on our Facebook, and let me just bring that to you. If you look at the work that our finance minister has led us to do in the first part before these pandemics hit us, it will not support that argument that because he was initially of the view that we can do this domestically, he should be fired. I don't think so. That's Kojo Ponkruma, information minister, and there are some 48 comments there. Tina Korte says, oh, Ghanaians, we talk like Israelites in the days when Moses was leading them. Josco the best says, don't be surprised, you don't even get anything from IMF. A word to the wise is enough. And Al Hassan says, is Ken Oforiatta the only person in the MPP that can handle the finance ministry? What is so special about this minister who messed up the economy? Now realize you're indeed running a family and friends government. There's more to that comment by Al Hassan. But let's get onto the phone lines now. Frank is calling us from Kumasi. Let's hear you, Frank.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. This NPP government do not respect us as Ghanaians. They have never taken responsibility for anything. If they do wrong, they would rather shift it on someone. They rather have fallen and then unsatisfactory. I think we should just vote these people out and then bring someone else so that we can move as a country. Because the hardship is too much. I've been in the house for almost a year now, no working. When you go, people will not come to patronize your services. All in the name that they are broke and they don't have money. But we have a president who will hire a jet for house flying in the air as a sense of support and go to some parts in Ashanti region. Here, at now, we still have school-going children lying on the first floor, rising. It's a pity. The country is in the mess. Let me leave you here.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. That's Frank from Kumasi. In Teshi, we have Akins. Hello, Akins. Let's hear you. Hello, Akins.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Let's hear your contribution.
Okay. I don't know, this particular government, for me, I think they have one of the best policies and initiatives. But the problem with them is they don't do a complete feasible study before they come out to announce whatever they want to implement. So they rush in. It seems like they always want to please the public and doing the actual work in the background. So you realize that at the end of the day, when they bring their policies or the initiatives out, then they try to work behind the scene. Then later when they realize that, okay, this thing couldn't work, let's find another option. So it's like they always want to please the public, which is very wrong. They should have do a due diligence to whatever initiative or policy they want to implement before they come out. But they rush into it, okay? Because you realize there's inconsistency among the entire government sector, from the president to the foot soldier. Because one person will bring in an issue, will say something, and then the other person is not in support of it. They have a different news or different information altogether. So there's no consistency between the communication that goes on. And then I think that the best thing they could do is to do consultation. You know, they should involve the entire parties, the opposition parties, and then come to one understanding and see the best thing that can be okay for the country. But for the finance minister, I think the best thing he can do is to resign.
Thank you very much, Akins.
If he doesn't resign, he needs.
Let's hear now. Let's hear Annabelle from Tema. Good morning to you, Annabelle. Let's hear what you have to say.
Good morning. Please, my father is Nanado. President Nanado and Baumia-led government. They should come out and apologize to Ghanaians for deceiving us. You know, 2015, there was global crisis when NDC went to IMF. Now they are blaming their crisis on Russia, Ukraine, even the surrounding countries. Nigeria, for instance, are they not in this war? They are also affected by the war and the pandemic. And even with this COVID, the money we have from World Bank, the trust fund, what did they use the money for?
The finance minister has been to Parliament to give an account.
The finance minister has been to Parliament, but we had in audio what Tamalio Sablugu, a parliamentary candidate, was saying in a tape that they dispersed the money to them. It was alleged, but we heard the voice. You know, they should come and apologize to Ghana, and they should thank the finance minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle from Tema. Talking about apologies, and yesterday the information minister was asked if he will render an apology for the U-turn. It wasn't rendered. Well, he had his own explanations and reasons for what we refer to as a U-turn decision by government to go to the IMF. But we'll take now a few more comments on Facebook while we wait for the rest of you who have thoughts on this issue to share them with us. Golden Boy GH says, this one is just robots being controlled by a remote. Oh, okay. Too hashed. Kofi Abdul Hamid says, in 2017-2018, we were under the IMF. Any success was as a result of the IMF. In 2019, we were coming from IMF, so Furiata didn't do any magic. Okay, Kari Awal says, we don't have confidence in Akufo-Addo himself not to talk of Ken Ofori-Atta. In fact, government has failed shamefully and willfully. Silencer says, oh yes, Akufo-Addo still has confidence. Okay, he's also talking about looting and sharing. Bra Opia says he must go. He thinks that there's a lot of covering up. Rachel Brown says, so Kojo, don't you have any dignity? Okay. Okay, Emmanuel says your job is hard. He says that he needs to keep defending government. Well, let's get back onto the phone lines and go to Bole now. Wahid joins us. Good morning, Wahid. Please share your thoughts with us.
Yes, for me, what I have to say about the whole issue is that Ghana as a nation, I don't think the democratic system that we are running actually helping us, because it's all about family and friends and cronies. From the Nkrumah government down to the current NPP government, they are all serving their immediate family members, their cronies, and party members. So I don't think if NPP goes and then NDC comes, there's going to be any difference. They are all running the same government. Because going to the IMF for the 17th time, it looks like going for a fish instead of going to learn how to fish. It doesn't change our situation. And nothing changes. So I think what the NPP government needs to do is cut down on their expenditure and stop the issue of feeding food soldiers, cronies, and other things. It is never helping the country. We are all suffering. And one thing I want to add to this, the issue of the COVID fund. Some of us, we are nurses and we did the vaccination. But if you listen to what has been spent on the COVID, the COVID fund, what has been spent, and what has been given some of us, the vaccinated, who roam these villages, on these dirty roads, struggling to go and vaccinate people as far as we can. And if you listen to what has been spent by the ministry and other things on conferences and other things, it's very appalling, very appalling. I think that something needs to be done, and it's not just about IMF. The IMF will not solve the problem because it's not about financial issues. It's more about leadership issue, and IMF is not going to give us leadership. They are not going to provide us human resources to occupy our leadership position. They are only going to give us financial help, assistance. So I don't think IMF is going to help us in any way. So if we don't change, sorry for my voice, if we don't change the leadership, human resources that we have, we are going to go to IMF for 100th time in the future. So I think the problem is about leadership, the corruption, and the democratic party system that we are running. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us, Wahid. Let's go to Vincent in Afienya. Hello, Vincent. Hello, Vincent. Are you still here? Well, I think we lost Vincent there. But he was joining us from Afienya, sharing his thoughts on government's decision to go back to the IMF. And a few more comments on the call for the finance minister to be sacked. There's a response and from the information minister, Kojo Ponkru, who says, well, prior to us being hit by COVID, the facts are there to prove that the finance minister was actually doing well, and so he doesn't deserve to be sacked. Kweku Wanda says, why wouldn't he? Okay, they share the same ideology and common interest. KG Tete says he came out again. Tomorrow the news will come out that Oforiatta has been dismissed. He did the same for IMF, and the next day it happened, and he says, jokers. Let's scroll down to see a lot more of your comments. Adam Yusuf says, okay, he talks about the relationship, family and friends issue. Someone else raised that. Malik Jackson Hassan says, this is justification of who is running the economy. Godfred Mancon thinks this is a disgraceful team. And I've actually seen an artwork on social media where people have put the president, the vice, the finance minister, and if my memory serves me right, the senior minister, the former senior minister there, talking about the fact that this government said they had a good team, the best team actually to lead this country to where we all wanted to be. Well, Adam thinks, well, that's his business, and so for him, he doesn't really care about whether he's sacked or not. We've had a few callers suggest that he should resign from that position himself. Well, the conversations will continue. We're expecting a team from the IMF to be in the country on Wednesday for further engagements, and so we will be keeping our eyes on this particular engagement and let you know what comes out of it. But for now, we have to head to the Greater Accra region, head to Accra to be precise. The Greater Accra region has deployed some city guards, and my colleague Michael Ashale joins us live to tell us more about that. Hello, Michael. So what exactly are these city guards expected to do?
Yes. The La Paz terminal is one of them. The Kaneshi Enclave is also one of them. In Circle, CMB, you go to Kimbu, you go to the areas around Accra, you are definitely going to be seeing men like this, dressed like this, in ash and in reflectors. They are there supposed to do a number of things. They're also going to be complementing the work of the sanitation officers that are with the district assemblies already. So these men will be of a sort of deployment. They'll move forward, talk to individuals, homes, businesses on what they are supposed to do to keep their area clean. If you are found culpable, you are given a warning for the first time, for the second time, the third time. They are likely to be coming with the environmental health and sanitation team, which have the mandate from the bylaws to sanction you. They have the mandate as well to also process you for court, and then you are punished. The law stipulates a number of punishments that could be given to you, ranging from fines to even imprisonment if you are able to pay the fine. So more than 500 people just today, some of them have already been deployed. They are going to be led by a former colonel of the Ghana Army, Colonel Kofi Emisa Mensah, together with other people. He's going to be working together with over 50 ex-military men as well, most of them warrant officers, who will be helping to act as supervisors of these men who are in uniform and be helping them to understand. There's a big caveat here, that these men are not what we term abaye. Those that have been in the business for some time now, working sometimes with the assemblies, confiscating the words of those who break the law. The minister has made that clear, that none of these men you see here, the city response team, are supposed to be doing that. They are not supposed to be confiscating the words of anybody. They are supposed to be cautioning them, ensuring that the right thing is done. That's not all. The involvement of the military, of ex-military men, it's a caution for some of the some people are scared that these men are going to be brutalizing people and be doing some other things. But the minister has said that these men are supposed to act democratically, and just to make sure that as disciplined leaders, as supervisors, they make sure these men do not do the wrong thing as well. And he's been talking about sustainability as well, that they have one financial clearance for these men and women to be, receiving allowances under the city response team at Accra, making Accra work again agenda. These men have received financial clearance for that. And then there's more. They have the mandate to also do some other things. So this is the city response team parading through some key areas within the Greater Accra region. Currently, we just passed Fanofa and we are heading towards Circle, the Kwame Nkrumah interchange. This is an awareness campaign that the minister himself is leading. More than 500 people here who are marching. After here, they'll be deployed to the various assemblies where they will now do the work proper here. We'll be bringing you some more updates as and when we have them. For Joy News, Michael Ashale.
It's been an exciting program this morning, and it's been great coming your way. Thank you so much for joining me this morning to do this. But before I go, I need to give you some important information. Awake is premium purified water that's been treated through strict purification processes to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. We have the perfect size for every occasion. The 330 and 500 ml bottles to fit your pockets and bags. The 750 ml for the heavy drinkers and 1.5 liters for those who always want more. We've also introduced our special 19-liter jars for offices and homes. Now you just need to stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. Come on, grab a bottle of Awake Water and get quality hydration. Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. Remember, for every bottle you purchase, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. It's produced by Casa Preco. For bulk purchases, please call 026-235-1251. And just so you know, VAT returns are due for submission on the last working day of every month. Failure to submit returns attracts a penalty. Just keep that in mind. Also, rent to own a 2, 3 or 4 bedroom house or beachfront villa in the new Accra city. City's inhabitants rent to own at a price you can afford and at a pace you can pay. Just visit www.newaccra.city for more details or call or WhatsApp 055 530 300, 0577 911101 or 0557 054 635. The planned city's extension project shaping Ghana's urban future. And like Benjamin will say, we hope that we've shaped your morning. Do enjoy the rest of your day, but do stay with Joy News because up next is News Desk. Remember, Joy News, independent, fearless, and credible. I'm Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah. Enjoy the rest of your day.